Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Sweetwater County Board of County Commissioners meeting for this Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. There is a quorum present with all 5 commissioners in chamber. Please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Then following the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll have a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we have the approval of the agenda, I would like to have the commissioners know that if we're still doing business as a board at about 12:20, we will take a break as we can set up for a Zoom meeting that is going to be commissioners have been invited to, and we've been invited by the Terra Natrium, which is the Gates Foundation, as well as Pacific Corps. They are going to announce today with the commissioners whether or not where the location for the new Natrium nuclear plant will be, and that'll be at 12:30 today. So if we're in chambers, we'll try to do it over the screens so that who's ever here will hear it along with us. If we're not in chambers, then of course we'll have it on our individual computers. So we will stop for that. And then of course at 2 p.m. this afternoon out of Cheyenne will be a public service announcement announcing that. So if we're in session, commissioners, at about 12:10, we definitely will, or 12:20, we'll definitely take a break so we can set up for that. If we're in executive session, we will come out of executive session for that, and then we'll go back into executive session. So just kind of bear with us as we plan for it. So with that announcement, I would like to, at this point in time, have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
A motion by Commissioner Smith to approve the agenda. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shanefield.
I have 2 amendments that I would like to propose.
Okay, would you make your first motion to amend the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to include the museum, Dave Mead with the museum. He would like to make a request to use the county room for an exhibit. And I would like to put that in ahead of other after Southwest Counseling contract.
All right, so we have basically a motion to amend the agenda to add under N, letter O, which would be, I believe, a museum for a facility request of a exhibit in the courthouse. Is that correct?
Yes, in the community room.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion for that amendment. You already have it by Commissioner Shanefield. Okay, I'll entertain a second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Point of order question on the amendment.
Sure.
How come it wasn't on the agenda, and did they not make does it not on the agenda because they didn't make the timelines to get it on the agenda in time?
That's correct.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman,
Go ahead, Commissioner Shanefield.
they were waiting to hear back from a county employee that never got back to them. And so they didn't realize that they needed to be on the agenda until after it had already gone out.
Any other questions? Any other discussion?
One more point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner?
I think it's pretty clear on the stuff that what time things have to be in and stuff like that. So, but anyway, just asking.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1. Any other amendments to the motion to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shanefield.
I would like to make a motion to bring Sweetwater Medics conversation out of executive session and place that ahead of other as well.
All right, so we have a motion to amend the agenda by bringing Sweetwater Medics contract out of executive session and putting it as letter P. Is there a second?
Second,
Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
point of clarification from our attorney. John, is it okay to have that? Mr. De Leon, is it okay to have that conversation outside of executive?
It's my understanding that they will be discussing matters that are available for non-executive purposes. So I think that the board and the chairman can consider placing that on the regular agenda if there should become some items that are executive, then the board can certainly address those in that fashion as well. So I think there's been a mix of issues there. So sometimes it's hard to ascertain what matters are being discussed, but I think that what's on the table can potentially be put in non-executive.
Thank you, John.
Question answered, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the contract for just the discussion point is the contract is for public knowledge as well as contents. Because when we approved that originally, it became part of the minutes, become part of the county documents. So if it's purely a discussion regarding the contract, then it's perfectly fine. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Any other amendment to the agenda? I have one. I would amend the agenda that we remove from executive session pre-decisional. Is there a motion supporting that?
I would so move.
So moved by Commissioner Lloyd. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shanefield. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Going back to our original agenda now with the three amendments. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any more amendments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. With that, we move into the approval of the minutes for November 3rd, 2021. Commissioners, your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to approve the minutes of November 3rd.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Toman to approve the minutes of November 3rd, 2021. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shanefield. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next order of business, acceptance of the bills. That's approval of the county vouchers warrants, approval of the monthly reports, approval of the abates and rebates, approval of the hospital maintenance expenditures. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Smith.
I move that we accept the bills as presented.
We got a motion by Commissioner Smith to accept the bills as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under tab C, we now have planning and zoning, a temporary hardship exception for Mrs. Peters. To present that will be Mr. Bingham. Good morning, Mr. Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just so the board is aware, we have the applicant, Ms. Peters, here. We
Excuse me,
also
Mr.
have.
Point of order, Mr. Bingham.
Yes.
Will you introduce yourself, please? So
Hi,
we
Mr.
got
Bingham.
an audience full of people who wonder who we are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric Bingham, Land Use Director
Thank you.
with Sweetwater County,
Thank you, sir.
17 years.
I deserve that. All right,
Touche.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have one public hearing today. It is a hardship exception. It is Ms. Mona Lee Peters, and I just wanted to make the commissioners aware and the chairman that we have people online that are also going to want to comment. We have, I could see on there, Mr. Homer is online and Ms. Floyd is also online. So we have those two when we get to the public comment section that will possibly be giving their comments. So with this, Mr. Chairman, the first one is the hearing that we have today is a temporary hardship exception. It is the applicant and owner is Mona Lee Peters. The location is at 530 Mesa Drive and has all the infrastructure there, Rocky Mountain Power, White Mountain Water and Sewer. It's in the Fire District 1 area. So I have Mr. Zimmerman here too, our code enforcement specialist, who is going to join me also and kind of give you some background to this so that you have all the facts moving forward. Mona Lee Peters submitted an application for a hardship exception in August 26, 2001 to allow for a manufactured home to continue on the property. This trailer was subject of a previous hardship exception for her husband. The Sweetwater County resolution allows for hardship exception when after approval. So typically what happens here is a 14-day comment period. These are usually approved by staff. We did send out the comment forms and we received numerous negative comments. And when that happens, it goes to public hearing. So in accordance with the zoning resolution, we scheduled a hearing, which we held last week before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we're here today to listen to the temporary hardship exception to be approved. Ms. Peters has submitted a letter for her medical provider, which is included with the report. The property is connected to water and sewer, and the manufactured home that is currently on the property meets setback requirements. So with the letter that was submitted, we did receive a letter from the Memorial Hospital, Dr. Britton Long, and I do want to read this into the record. Mona Lee Peters is a patient currently under my care. Due to her medical conditions, patient needs family to be close and available to assist her as needed. If you have any questions, please contact the clinic. Thank you, Dr. Long. So I have Mr. Zimmerman here to give you a little bit of background. Staff had concerns with this letter. A hardship exception is a full-time type of use. That's why you're allowed to have an additional home on the lot. And our concerns were with this letter was as needed, rather than the previous letter, which I'm going to have Mr. Zimmerman read into the record. Go ahead, Jim.
Mr. Zimmerman, please introduce yourself.
Jim Zimmerman, Code Enforcement Officer, Sweetwater County.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, may I approach?
Yes, you may. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, what we have here is Mrs. Peters' husband was the original temporary hardship condition here on this house. And the letter that was received, the last letter, every year they have to update the letter showing that they still need the hardship. So in June of 2020, we got the latest hardship letter, which says, to whom it may concern. This was from Dr. Peter Crane, neurology in Lander. He said, Robert C. Peters has a medical condition that needs 24-hour around-the-clock care by someone living on the premises. So basically, that was the letter we received, and that was the original hardship. In November, this was received every year. This was updated in November. Mr. Peters died and he passed away. And so at that point, the temporary hardship would no longer be allowed on that property. It would then become need to be removed or become a violation. So that's where we're at with this letter.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you. Mr. Bingham,
Yeah,
continue.
thank you. So as you can see on the map here, the location, what's pointed towards which is the mobile home trailer, is on the right-hand side of the property there, or on the east side. And then you'll also see the home, which is located in front. So this is actually located in the rear lot. Since it was subject of a previous hardship exception, it does meet all the requirements as far as setbacks go. One concern that has come up a few times in comments that have come in that I thought I would point out is I'd kind of like to describe on the property, since we've got this up, all the structures that are located on there and their status, because there were concerns of is there people living in these other homes and such. So at the front of the property here is located the home. That's where Ms. Peters resides. And then her children live in this in the mobile home, manufactured home located here as part of the previous hardship exception to assist Mr. Peters. And then we have a barn that's located on the northwest side of the property. And then right here is another structure. It's a storage building, which has which was subject of a nuisance violation quite a while ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And what Ms. Peters did to rectify the nuisance violation was if you put them in a building, they become exempt. So they're no longer a nuisance violation. So that's what the purpose of that structure was. And then this manufactured home that's located in the back rear lot here, under the previous zoning resolution, we allowed for the storage of one unoccupied mobile home. And so we no longer allow that, but it is non-conforming, and I believe it's used as a storage building. So that, just want to state that because that was in the comments. People were concerned about all the structures that were on the property. And there's the pictures of the lot. So we have specific criteria for hardship exceptions. The property and mobile home meets the lot and parcel standards of the resolution. So it's 1.37 acres. So it does meet the water and sewer requirements. It also meets the distance between structures, which is 20 feet minimum. So it does meet that requirement. One thing I'm going to have Mr. Zimmerman again come up and describe a little bit of how we got to where we are today, as far as, because this was under violation just in the last year. And based on the decisions that are made today on where things will move forward. Go ahead, Mr. Zimmerman.
Mr. Zimmerman?
May I approach?
Yes.
So what I handed out to you is the timeline. I do this for all my violations. So I worked with Mona Lee for years, both on her original temporary hardship and also on a nuisance on her property. And so I called Mrs. Peters and left her know what was going on, because we had gotten to the point where the yearly doctor's answer was due for Bob. And unbeknownst to me, that Bob had passed away in November. And so I then immediately told Mrs. Peters what would be the process. So the process under a zoning violation in our department is, first, we notify with a letter asking for voluntary compliance. That is given for 30 days. And at the end of the 30 days, we send a letter saying that we're requiring mandatory compliance. And then after the 30 days for the mandatory compliance, then at that point, we turn it over to the county attorney's office for an injunction, some type of remedy. And so I explained all that to Mona Lee, and she was asking at the time, she was asking for if there was a way to have the hardship transferred to her. And I told her she couldn't do that. She had to reapply, and that's why we're here today. So I just wanted to let you know that we have started the process of violation, because if there's no temporary hardship, there's no need for that trailer to supply that aid to be on the property. So we are doing our due diligence, and the next step will be for compliance, or county attorney's office will take that over.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes. Any questions, commissioners, at this point for Mr. Zimmerman regarding the timeline or that? Commissioner Toman?
I just do have one question. Are there any other provisions that would allow that trailer to be there other than a hardship?
No,
No.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Toman, no.
No, one of the main zoning is there's in a residential community, and that's what this is zoned residential. There's only one primary dwelling allowed. So
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Bingham, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the second item of criteria is if the occupant of the mobile home is specifically engaged to assist the property owner with medical care requirement and no rent shall be charged to the mobile home occupant. So as I stated previously, a letter was submitted by her medical provider stating is a patient currently under her care, and due to her medical condition, patient needs family to be close and available to assist her as needed. Staff would like to point out that the letter does not state that the need for the accession has to be on site, as previous letters have stated. Furthermore, the intent of the hardship is for a full-time basis as needed. Again, Mr. Chairman, the letter does not state, it just says is close. What does close mean? Could it be down the street? And as needed, not 24-hour as previous letter. Third criteria, mobile homes shall be 20 feet apart. We've already gone over that, and it does meet that requirement. And then just for your information, point of information, the temporary hardship exception is valid for a period of 1 year with compliance inspections and non-fee renewals until the temporary hardship is no longer needed. So if it is approved today, Mr. Chairman, this is approved on a yearly basis. I won't read through the comments. You've been provided those, but there is a lot of, there was negative comments from David and Terry Jackson. These are all adjacent property owners. Dwayne and Terry Will, Kevin Homer, who is on the Zoom call, Mr. Chairman. Cecil and Shirley Woodward, Ms. Woodward is here, and Tanisha Floyd, who is also online, has submitted negative comments. Also included in your packet is letters from Ms. Mona Lee Peters that she sent to her neighbors to address some of their concerns. And then as far as agency comments go, emergency management had no concerns. Kinder Morgan, upon review, they also had no concerns. So as stated, staff does have concerns with this request. In addition, neighbors are expressing concerns of the request. At the November 10th, 2021 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 3-0 to deny the request. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bingham. I'd like to go back to your letters.
Yes.
And you said Dwayne and Terry Will. I believe it's Dwayne and Terry Witt.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just so the minutes read correctly. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, with that, commissioners, at this point in time, any questions for Mr. Bingham? Any questions for Mr. Zimmerman? All right, with that, at this point in time, I believe it's a recommendation of resolution. We'll open we'll open a public hearing regarding the recommendation of resolution 21-11-00 ZO-01. And keep in mind that this public hearing is with regard to Sweetwater County Planning and Zoning Commission recommends denial of the temporary use permit for a temporary hardship exemption in accordance with the 2015 zoning resolution. Normally, it's a hearing to support the resolution, but this is a hearing for denial as recommended. So at this time, I'll open up the floor for public hearing in chambers first. If there's anybody in the chamber that would like to come forward and comment regarding this resolution. If you do, please come to the podium, please state your name, who you're with, and make sure that you adjust the mic so it's close to your mouth so that everyone can hear that's online as well as it's recorded. So any public comments, please come forward. Thank you. State your name and where you live.
Yes, my name is Shirley Woodward.
Pull it real close. Get real close, Shirley. There you go.
Okay, my name's Shirley Woodward. I live at 580 Mesa, right next to Mona Lee.
Good morning, Shirley, and welcome.
Thank you. And first off, I'd like to say that large building is very well built. That's in the back that she had to comply with. But the siding of it is just sheets of plywood put up there. They fall off, they nail them up. It looks like shit. Oh, excuse me.
Excuse me.
Crap.
Thank you.
Okay.
Point of order.
Okay, but, but we've noticed in the 30 years we've lived there that she is more of a hoarder. She hoards cars. Now it's mobile homes. And on August the 24th or thereabouts, 2016, we noticed this big trailer coming in. Our driveways are side by side. We see what's going on over there all the time. We don't pay attention to it 90% of the time, but you know, our windows face the house. We seen it come in. We talked to Charlie's wife at the time, and she said that it was so that she could help with taking care of Bob. Well, a couple of years, she's gone. We have no idea. She's just gone. And then I'd talked to Eric about it. In fact, when the trailer was being pulled in, I called him and asked if there was any reason what was going on. She never told us nothing, never has told us anything. And he said that the permit was in the works. I said, you mean there's no permit? He said, no. Well, she'll stand on a stack of Bibles and tell you there was, but no, there was no permit at the time the trailer was pulled in. So I objected to it for 3 days and then told Eric, go ahead, Bob needs the help. So I finally gave him permission to go ahead and let the trailer be there. And then Bob passes. The trailer was supposed to be removed within 6 months, which is what Eric had told me. Mona Lee must have known that too. No, she never even bothered to let you know he died. And then she has a letter that she sent to us, which you all can read. And on it, she says to all her dear neighbors, you know what? That woman hasn't spoke to one of us since that trailer went in. She used to at least say hi, you know, so. And she hasn't done that. And then she enclosed the front porch. Looks like crap. There's a picture of it somewhere around here, and it's covered with black sheeting. Why? There's one person in that house. Why? The hoarding comes in this position. Bob raised 10 kids in that house. She can't raise one. I don't understand. I just don't understand. She says that she can't do this, she can't do that. Saturday before last, we seen her on a 16-foot ladder painting her house. Well, a person who's afraid of the ground coming up and meeting him, don't get on a 16-foot ladder. I can tell you that from experience. Mona Lee also stated that the trailer had been there 6 years. It's only been there 5 now. And no matter what she thinks, no matter how defiant she gets toward us, if something was to happen to her, we would be there to help her immediately. So the sayings that she's afraid of falling down and being laying out in her yard and not getting help, cars are in and out every day. She ain't going to be laying there very damn long. And that's all I have to say. And we think she's a wonderful person, but we wish she would communicate. All of us neighbors do.
Thank you, Shirley. Before you leave,
Oh, yes.
any questions for Shirley, commissioners? So Shirley, I got to ask you, you're in support of the resolution of denial for the temporary?
Yes,
Thank you.
very much so. There's also a fifth wheeler there. It's full of junk. The barn's full of junk.
Mhm.
The house, I've seen it once.
Thank you, Shirley. Anybody else in chambers that would like to comment in this public hearing?
Mr.
Anybody
Chairman,
else in chambers?
Mona Lee, if you want to talk, now would be the time.
Come on up and please introduce yourself. Mona Lee, speak into the mic very closely, please.
Okay.
Adjust it if you need to, so it fits
Alright.
for you. There you go.
Yeah.
If we can't hear you, I'll ask you to come closer.
Okay,
Thank you. Good morning, Mona Lee.
hi. Well, number one, the letter, when I called the doctor to find out if they could do more specific, they said that the law wouldn't let them allow them to be any more specific than they were. The condition that I have, it's not curable. There's no magic pill to do anything to help. It just gets worse as I age, and stress and fatigue both augment the problem. And so I have asked that I could keep my kid's house on the lot because I just really don't want to be left alone. And Shirley said they would be over here. Yeah, but if you don't know and you don't interact with people because they find fault wherever they look for it, you know, there's no way to know that I even have a problem. So my kids interact with me every day. They know if I don't answer the phone or if something's wrong, whatever, they'll know, you know, within an hour or two. And I really just really don't understand why the problem is, you know, I understand, yeah, I have a lot of junk, but I thought that, well, you know, Mrs. Kravitz on the old series Bewitched, I thought she was an over exaggeration, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, I don't know how anyone would even know what was in my outbuildings unless they were constantly watching every move I make, but I don't know about that. So what else did I need to say? On the painting and stuff like that I've been doing, I made sure that I didn't get on the ladder until I had somebody right there watching to make sure that if I did fall, I was going to be taken care of. So, and when I built that little bus enclosure, it's been there for over 3 years. I had 3 big boys helping me to get that built. So I've not done it alone. And I don't have the strength to do it alone. And so I can only do a little at a time, but I try to keep busy and do it. So anyway, I guess that's about all I need to tell you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Peters. First of all, I apologize. First thing I should have told you is condolences on our part for the loss of your husband, which just wasn't too long ago, and we understand that hardship. So our condolences, please. Commissioners, any questions for Mrs. Peters? Huh? Mrs. Peters, I have one question. Have you looked at the possibility of a alert button to where you could
Yeah, they only work when you're in the house. They don't work when you're out in the yard because they're connected to the house phone.
yeah, I don't know about that. I've just heard about them.
So, and I have
don't know.
chickens. I feed my chickens.
All right, but
And
just a question I had. All right, any
So-
other questions, commissioners? Thank you, Mrs. Peters. If we have anything else, we may call you back up. All right, anybody else in chamber that would like to comment regarding this resolution, which is a recommendation of denial? Okay, let's go to our online, and Mr. Bingham on the line. I believe I see Mr. Homer, and then I see Mr. or Mrs. Floyd. So let's start with Mr. Homer, please, Mr. Bingham.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Homer. You can.
Would you
Your
please
comment.
introduce yourself, Mr. Homer, and what you represent?
So this is Kevin Homer. We live at 497 Mesa.
In relation to the residents that we're discussing, where do you live exactly?
Pretty much across the street.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Well, so I want to be sympathetic about Bob and some of the stuff that she's going through, but one of my biggest concerns is setting a precedent for the neighborhood and having a multi-dwelling houses on these single lot units. You know, I don't want to sound bad, but her granddaughter, I believe, lives right next door or very close. I think this trailer is a convenience. You know, the kids go to school, he goes to work. They're not there 24/7. The technology today with Life Alert and Wi-Fi and all that stuff can be handled. We've had some personal illnesses in our family, and I didn't move a bunch of trailers in. I mean, we managed it. So I guess that's my overall thought.
Thank you, Mr. Homer. So you are supporting the resolution, which is denial of this hardship?
Yeah, denial.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Homer, commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Homer. We'll go on to our next one. I believe is either Mr. or Mrs. Floyd. Is that correct, Eric?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. and Mrs. Floyd, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please, and where you live in proximation to this property.
My name is Keith Floyd. I live at 477 Mesa Drive, and we're down the street, a couple houses from down the street and across from the residence in question.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
So I'm with Mr. Homer on, I don't want to sound callous. I am very sympathetic to her current situation and the loss of her husband. My concerns is that trailer's been there for several years now. It is set up as a permanent structure. At what point does this go on? As Mr. Homer said, the precedents that could be set. I mean, I work in the medical field, so especially emergency services. So I see what people go through to deal with when they're living alone, etc. Mr. Homer touched on it. There's a lot of things that can be utilized to make sure she is safe in her home living alone. But my biggest concern, and I understand if she needs help, that kind of stuff, but my biggest concern is it's set up as a permanent structure. It's not, few years thing, or it's clearly becoming a permanent thing. I have no idea who lives in the house. I don't know what she requires as far as care that requires them to be there, other than if she falls. Their medical background, whatever, in home health care. I don't know what the nature of that is. So to me, it strikes me as my kids live there and that's where I want them to live kind of deal. So, so I support the resolution to deny it.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Floyd? No questions. Is there anybody else online, Eric?
No, Mr. Chairman, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Bingham. With that, I'll make a last call for public comment on the chamber. If anybody's in the chamber that would like to comment. Last call. Public hearing closed. With that, public hearing being closed, commissioners, your pleasure with regard to resolution 21-11-ZO-01 for a temporary use permit for a hardship exception, and that Sweetwater County Board of County Commission denies the temporary use permit for a hardship exception in accordance with 2015 zoning resolutions. Commissioners, your pleasure regarding the resolution.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shanefield,
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 21-11-ZO-01.
we have a motion to approve the resolution as presented, which is a denial. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Any further discussion, commissioners? Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Bingham. Thank you for everyone that was here. Mrs. Peters, do you realize that you'll have to conform with the regulations as expected through not only planning and zoning, but the violation of nuisance? You understand that? Thank you very much. So we appreciate you being here this morning. Appreciate everybody that showed up for comment, as well as those that are online. So with that, we'll continue moving through with our agenda. At this point in time, I'll open the floor again for county resident concerns. County resident concerns. We have the floor is open. If anybody has any concerns or comments, please come up to the podium, state your name, who you're with, and we'll go from there. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Holman. I was here a couple of weeks ago asking for support for our local veterans. You guys did a great job. Thank you. Commend you for that. I also commend you. I truly believe you work your hardest. You do the best you can for our community. I appreciate that. I'm just a resident today, and I'm here to offer a suggestion or two. I'll be brief about our 1 cent sales tax, the referendum we had a couple of weeks ago. I voted against that, and just for a couple of reasons. Personally, I was an EMT for many years. My son now is an EMT. My wife is an ER nurse. We need EMTs. We need ambulances. We need to take care of our citizens. With that being said, I agree we need to do something. You guys are in a tough spot. You just made a tough decision. I appreciate the hard work you do. I feel that if we, as a community, came together, this board is very transparent, which is great. Educate our community on our needs. And right now, the specific need I'm talking about is EMS service. Sooner or later, one of us, all of us, our loved ones, we can go down that road. But if we offer, let me back up. I don't know all the facts about the 1 cent proposal out there. I hear bits and pieces of it. Some of that would be offering free EMS services. If that's the case, I think that would be a mistake. It would be like offering free food. People would get free food. There would be abuses. And if we abuse our EMS system, we can tie up all of our EMTs, all of our equipment. We can fill up our hospitals very quickly with people that may not need emergent help. So with that being said, I believe if we lowered what we're asking for from a cent to maybe a quarter of a cent to a half a cent, show a little more transparency, maybe explain to the public exactly what we want to do with that money, how we want to help our EMTs. They're a private company, but they have a duty to act. And you folks know what the duty to act is. If you have an EMS service, if somebody doesn't have insurance, if they do have insurance, you still have a duty to act and go help them, whether they can have the finances to pay or not. So our EMT system has to go out on all calls. You can't be selective if somebody does not have insurance. So I support helping our EMS. I want to make that clear. I also support showing our community, all of our residents, exactly what you want to do with that money. It might be tough. You guys make tough decisions. I've seen that today. I've seen that in the past. So I'm asking you to carry on, to try to keep supporting our EMS, our EMTs. But if we're not careful, that whole system could be abused. As a former EMT, I've seen the abuses. I've taken patients in that did not have an emergent condition, and you get on I-80, then the next team gets paged out, if there is a next team, to something that is a very critical, very important moment. So I've got some ideas. I'm not here to complain. I have concerns. I firmly and truly believe that if you have concerns, or if you're going to complain, don't sit on your pockets and just complain, maybe offer some suggestions. And I'm willing to do that. I know we have a few minutes here today. So I'm offering myself to help. If you have a workshop or something like that, I would love to sit down and talk. I know you've probably talking to Mr. Gaddy, Mr. Taylor, Bailey Doctor. They have great ideas. I implore you to listen to them. We can't lose our EMS. We need them as much as we need fire and police. So with that being said, I hope I got my point across. I want to thank you for the work you do. Thank you for giving me time to stand here and voice my concerns. And again, I believe that if you're going to complain or have a concern, you should help. So I'm willing to help. With that being said, I'm going to go to work now. And thanks, thanks for your time. Before I leave, about 1,200 residents of Green River did, or of Sweetwater County did, vote to increase the sales tax. You know, we have budgets. So about 1,200 people are pretty much firmly behind you. Convince the rest of us. We'll get behind you, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for your time.
Other public comments, public concerns? If there is, please approach the podium. Anything coming in online, Ms. Lane? Very good. Other? Last call for public comments. Floor is closed for public comments. Let's try and do a action item, and we're scheduled for a break about 9:25. So let's move through and start with tab D, which is SCDC and Sweetwater County Land and Use 2022 Town Hall Meeting Partnerships that are being scheduled and facilitated. So here is Mr. Bingham, our with our Land Use Department, as well as Ms. McDonald with the Sweetwater Economic Development Coalition. Both of you are with Sweetwater. All right, the floor is whom? Kayla going to start?
Sure, I'll take this one, and then
Sure.
we'll go back and forth. Kayla McDonald, Sweetwater Economic Development Coalition. Good morning, Chairman and Commission. Eric and I are here today to talk to you about the opportunity to bring back the town hall programs that you guys had previous before SCDC came here. It was a partnership with land use, and so what we're proposing is partnering with you and the rest of the elected officials throughout the county to put together not so much of a town hall. We're trying to brand it something different, a little bit more open for people to feel like it's welcoming. It's not going to be kind of a tension area, but more informative. So what we're proposing is coffee with the county. What we're looking at doing is getting some local sponsors from local small businesses to provide coffee and refreshments. Before you, I put together a flyer. These dates are subject to change. They're just suggestions. As you and I discussed earlier, there's probably some meetings that could play into effect on these dates. But what we'd like to do is at least 2 a month, starting with Folsom, then going Rock Springs, Green River, Wamsutter, McKinnon, Bear Oil, and have the conversations about future projects that the county is looking at, current projects that are already in place, as well as economic development updates from what we're doing. Hopefully, once we have the word today from TerraPower and Rocky Mountain Power, how that could possibly affect if it's placed here, or even going forward with some future development, Middle Baxter, et cetera. So what we're asking today is for some funding to do the programs, which will cost us some probably rental space if we can't get that done in kind at these locations, and also some marketing funding, and then just to help cover any refreshments and coffee. And then anything you have to add.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, so I believe just Commissioner Wendling, you were part of the program years ago. I know it's been a long time because Commissioner Kolb was in office. So I know the 4 of you have not been a part of this program. Very excited. Some of the feedback we've gotten on SCDC is they'd like to know more information. And I think this is a way of getting out in the community and sharing some of the projects that we're working on. So it's a way of us getting that information back. We're looking for what's been successful, because I've run a few of these programs, is you have to market it. And usually it's mailers. And so that can be expensive. So we're looking at potentially like asking for $5,000 to hopefully cover the cost of refreshments and advertisement and getting it out there, because the more people, the better these are, because we want feedback. So that's what we're here today for, Mr. Chairman, and take any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions, commissioners, comments regarding for either Ms. McDonald or Mr. Bingham?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, no questions. I just want to commend Mr. Bingham and Ms. McDonald for bringing forth this idea. I think as we aim to be more transparent and open with the community, I think this is a fantastic idea and worth the cost, because when you build, I guess I'm a field of dreams guy, if you build it, they will come. And I think that this is a great opportunity to allow our constituents to come see us on their own grounds and non-threatening situations or in relaxed situations. So I commend you, and I'm excited to participate and be part of this.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just thought of one other thing. So, and Mr. De Leon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're the ones that actually call the meeting, the Land Use Department and Economic Development, then we can have we won't be in violation of open meeting, because it would be us that would be holding the meeting. That way we can invite all the commissioners to be there. Do I have that correct, Mr. De Leon, or do we have to have further discussion?
I think let's talk about that a little bit and see what.
Okay. Okay, so to be continued.
All right, very good. We'll let you work on that piece.
Okay.
We're hoping it all works out. So
Okay.
that's the case. We don't have to worry about a quorum issue for whether it's us that show up or the cities or whoever it is. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments, commissioners?
Mr.
Commissioner Shane?
Chairman?
Yeah. Commissioner Tolman?
Yes. I support the concept of getting out into the communities, and I don't think you have to worry about 5 of us showing up. We can send 2 to each one. So
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what we've done before.
we can be all right with that. So thank you for the effort. I think it's a very good cause.
Thank you, Commissioner Tolman. Commissioner Shanefield, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to make a comment. I agree with my fellow commissioners. This is a great idea, and I think that it will assist in open transparency, and it also assists SEDC and give some of these small communities that we don't necessarily get out into the opportunity to give their feedback, and for us to understand some of their issues and concerns as well, so that we can really work with them. So thank you for your effort.
Thank you. Commissioner, other comments? Commissioner Smith?
Sure.
You looked like you wanted to say something.
Do I? Okay, I'll say something. That was great. I think it's a good idea. And I like that we're stealing it from Roy and his coffee with the commish. So that's awesome. Anything we can do to, make Roy feel good about the great ideas he has. I think it's
Thank you for
awesome.
letting me in your circle, Jeff.
Any other comments? Yeah, I'll just share with it. Yeah, I was part of when we did that before, and I thought it went very well for what we had done. I do want to comment, though. I truly believe we need to know whether or not we're in violation of open meeting law, because as I look at this, any one of them could have all 5 of us there. And I think that was the case with the last one, is we thought we'd have more, but we thought we'd be in violation of open meetings. So there were only 2 there, but I really would hope that our county attorney's office can verify that, since you're hosting it as SEDC, that all of us, because I could see any one of these where all 5 of us could be there, that type of thing. So, all right. Any other questions, commissioners? Comments? All right, we thank you, and let's keep moving forward, because it's very viable. It's something that needs to go on. I'll even say even more often than just once every 4 or 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Okay, well, commissioners, I'm going to push one more item. It won't take that long. Then we'll take our break at 9:30. So let's go with library board appointment. And I believe, commissioners, in your packet, you do have the library board appointments, and let me pull it up quick like, so I can make sure we are where we need to be. Thanks for your patience. Okay, what we're looking for is, or add, is Sweetwater County appointment to the library board. Normally, this is a 3-year term, and this appointment is due to the expiring term of Mr. Help me out.
Pazina.
Pardon me?
It's Pazina.
Pazena, okay, thank you. His term expired. He is eligible for a reappointment. So not only is he eligible, we also have a new applicant, which is Lenore Perry. I know, Commissioner Lloyd, you are the liaison, but before you make a recommendation or anything, let's hear your thoughts and other commissioners' thoughts, and then I'll come back to you, since you're the liaison, and ask you for a recommendation. Is that okay?
Fine with me.
All right, go ahead. What's your thoughts right at this point in time?
I first want to comment, I think Lenore Perry would be a great addition to the library board. And I do know there will be another opening in the next 4 to 6 months, from my understanding, on the library board, to keep that in mind. With that being said, the library is currently looking for a new director, and in a search, they have an interim director, and we'll talk about a little bit during my liaison time, and Lindsay Travis. Philip currently serves as the board chair at the library. And I think keeping the continuity during the change and looking for a new director, of keeping the board chair would be a good move. So.
Thank you very much. Let's go down the line. Commissioner Tolman, any comments regarding the library board appointment?
I will follow Mr. Lloyd's lead. I know Lenore Perry is very interested in being on that board, but I will comply with whatever Commissioner Lloyd recommends.
Thank you. Commissioner Shanefield?
I agree with Commissioner Lloyd's comments and keeping that continuity, especially with the board president.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith.
How could I disagree with Commissioner Lloyd? So I'm good.
I agree with you. So, all right, Commissioner Lloyd.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Philip Pazena to the library board for reappointment.
We have a motion by Commissioner Lloyd to reappoint Mr. Pazena to the library board. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Commissioners, I'm going to push one more item. 9:35 is our scheduled break, so let's see if we can do it. Approval of the audit arrangement letter, and here to present that is Miss Berry. Good morning, Miss Berry.
Good morning, Chairman and
Thank
Commissioners.
you. Floor is yours.
I'm here to present the audit arrangement letter today. I provided two letters in your packet. One is the audit arrangement letter and the other is just a communication letter. But the audit arrangement letter is just basically a contract of the audit terms this year. And I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not, but I just wanted to point out the highlight. The charge for the audit is $85,000 this year. We are in a 3-year agreement with them, and we're in the second year of that agreement, and that amount was $85,000. So it does match that amount. So all I'm requesting today is for you to approve this letter and allow the chairman to sign.
All right, Commissioners, question for Miss Berry regarding the letter of arrangement. No questions? Okay, what's your pleasure regarding the audit arrangement letter and authorizing the chairman to sign?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shanefield,
I'll make a motion to approve as presented and authorize the chairman to sign.
a motion to approve and authorize chairman to sign. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, let's do Mr. Legercy's change order. Is he here?
You just left.
All right, let's take a break. We're a little late on our break, but let's take a 10-minute break. We'll be back here, let's say at 9:45, and then we'll start out with the change order. Thank you. Okay, I'll call this meeting back to order. Commissioner Lloyd, would you check to see if Commissioner Smith is ready?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. Make sure to close the door too, please. Would you close the door, please? Commissioner Lloyd, would you close the door, please?
I would.
Thank you. All right,
Anything
now
else,
we're back to
Commissioner?
order. We'll continue with our action items. And first thing up is tab G, which is a change order number 1 to the letter Folsom Pyramid Reconstruction Project. Mr. Legursky, please, the floor is yours. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gene Legursky. I'm the Public Works Director for the county. What you have before you is a change order for the Lester Folsom Pyramid Reconstruction Project that we've been going on that's out north of Rock Springs. A little background on this change order. What we ended up doing is deepening some of the culverts, deepening some of the ditches out there. And in doing so, that decreased the turning radius into a lot of people's houses. So after the design went through and after the bid, what we ended up doing is widening some of the approaches out 3 to 5 feet to make sure everybody had a good enough turning radius in. Well, when you do that and you have to pay for the culvert, then you have to pay for the base and you have to pay for the road and mill tanning. So basically what this is we overran the quantities that we had initially bid. They were all bid per specifications and we use the materials for that. It's just an overrun of the quantities because of I believe there was 22 approaches that we did this to, where people came out and talked to us and said, hey, can we make it a little bit wider? And we said, sure. So
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Legursky?
Why is he so accommodating?
Because he works for the county.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
no, it made sense. You know, there was only one that we honestly didn't think we should do because it was already wide enough, but all the rest of them, yeah, it made sense.
The real reason is it's A or B in his job description. Be accommodating, right?
Sure.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Legursky, commissioners? Commissioners, what's your pleasure regarding the change order number 1 to the Lester Folsom Pyramid Reconstruction Project and allowing the chairman to sign?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm out of order, but this is all going to come out of the fuel tax account. It was already budgeted as part of this job. So it's just, we need to change the price of the project. It's already budgeted.
Thank you. Very much appreciate that. Okay.
Mr.
Commissioners.
Chairman?
Yes,
I would-
Commissioner.
I would make the motion to approve the change order and allow the chairman to sign.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the change order as presented and allow the chairman to sign. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shanefield. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Legursky. Have a good day. Be safe. All right, up next is a discussion of additional holidays for county employees. Mr. McLean, please come forward, introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners. Thought maybe we could take tab H and I a little bit together in that they both have to do with holidays and time off. Tab H addresses specifically the issue around the holidays. In the past couple of years, depending on when the Christmas and Thanksgiving holiday and New Year's holidays fell, the board has approved either half day or some additional days off around the time frames. This year, as circumstances would have it, the holidays are on Saturday, so the holidays will be recognized on a Friday. The current county policy already approves Thursday and Friday for Thanksgiving. Friday would be the holiday for Christmas, and the same for New Year's. In looking at some of the other public entities, both the city of Rock Springs and Green River provide Monday off on the Christmas holiday. And that is one area of departure. There are a few local large employers such as Genesis Alkali that also grants that Monday off on the Christmas holiday as an additional holiday. There are 11 and a half current holidays approved by policy. And the question today for the board is whether we want to approve any other holidays so that we can communicate that around vacation, Christmas or New Year's. Going forth, I would recommend that we do this during the budget. There are some minor budget implications, especially for 24/7 operations like the Sheriff's Department, who have folks, if we approve an additional holiday, will be working with holiday pay on those days. So I would like to recommend, I guess, first of all, that that we take a look at consideration of an additional holiday on Monday following Christmas. Second, that we look at the holiday scheduled for the budget year as part of the budget process and adopt it as part of the budget since there are budget implications. And then the second part of the discussion is something that we brought up earlier in the year regarding the Juneteenth holiday. Currently, the state of Wyoming recognizes that on a Saturday. I think it's the third Saturday in June. And one of the points that we had discussed, which I think has some merit, is with respect to a floating holiday. Columbus Day has been a holiday, as you know, that many local entities, including the cities and state of Wyoming, have dropped as a paid holiday. Some of the banks and post offices still recognize that. One thought would be to maybe approve a floating holiday that could be used either on Columbus Day or Juneteenth Day, but the offices would otherwise maintain being open, following the same rules that we currently have, which is if the day happened to be on a Saturday, that could be a floating holiday on the Friday. If we're on a Sunday, that could be a floating holiday on the Monday. That might be a way of addressing those issues, or potentially other federal holidays if they're approved. As you know, there's a few on the board for discussion. I would remind everyone in consideration of these, obviously, that the current state approved holiday level is 10. So we're already a little bit higher than that. And depending on where the holidays falls, it's fairly similar to the cities. The one thing that's different for county government, as you know, we have a lot of activities, the clerk's office for one, treasurer's and assessor's office that have functions related to conducting business, such as titles and selling vehicles and transaction of deeds and property and other things that have to do with legal processes. So that's one thing that is a little bit different than the city government in that regard. And so I think that was the idea historically of indexing holidays to the banking and federal holidays so as not to unduly limit businesses from conducting business that needed to be interfaced with the county. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Those are the three items that I think need to be discussed, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at those times.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shanefield.
Gary, could you help me remember, because I think we had this discussion last spring about removing the federal official from Chapter 7.
Yes, that's been done.
Okay. I
Yes,
just wanted to
yeah,
make sure.
thank you. I should have brought that
No,
up. or-
that's fine. I just
yeah.
wanted to double check that was.
So just for everybody's clarification, Commissioner Schoenfeld brought up the question of the amendment that we had discussed last year about whether we were obligated to follow the state thing. We amended that, the board amended that at time. So any holidays would have to be approved by the board.
Thank you. And I have one more question.
Sure. Go ahead, Commissioner Shanefield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have you had any feedback from any of the department heads or elected officials about what they would prefer us do with this?
There's just some anecdotal, like I said, I've had a few with respect to the Christmas on Sunday. I think that as all of us recognize that especially as society has become more mobile, families are flying in and traveling everywhere, especially for those two holidays. So I know that would be appreciated. And I think the real issue is that I don't think any of us would object to more time off. It's obviously balancing that against the business needs of the county and the priorities that we have, and especially considering that there may be some requests for other federal holiday designation down the road.
Thank you. Other comments, commissioners? Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
Chairman, thank you. Yeah, I'm in favor of the Monday after Christmas. I like that. That's good. Juneteenth or Emancipation Day, at my business, we're actually going to recognize that next year, but I appreciate the points you brought up about it's not going to be a commonly recognized holiday, and so really could cause some problems. I see county-wide with the services and things that would be expected that day. So that becomes a little more problematic, I think. That's my thoughts.
Thank you. Commissioner Schneefield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with Commissioner Smith about Monday, the 27th. I think that's a good time for us to allow for our employees to be off. I think in my mind, I would like to maybe think about proposing having Columbus Day and Juneteenth be recognized as a floating holiday. And that would allow us to continue to conduct business during those hours. And it would also give our employees 8 hours that they can choose whenever to take that off, which is not going to cause as many disruptions for the sheriff's department and their overtime and things like that. So that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, I was actually going to make a similar recommendation to what Commissioner Seinfeld just shared. If we're going to recognize, if we choose to recognize Juneteenth, I would rather look at it as a floating concept for our employees. I think the flexibility is good, because my concern is piggybacks what Commissioner Smith said, is it's not one of those days you wake up and think, oh my gosh, this is a holiday. And when we do have business that flows through this building every day. And so by providing it as a floating holiday, we benefit our employees with that recognized holiday, but we allow business to go on as normal.
Thank you. Other comments? Commissioner Toman.
Well, I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think it's fair to have a floating holiday, and the Monday after Christmas, I think it's fair to give our employees a break. I do want to remind everyone though, Mr. McLean, how much does our current payroll per day? I believe Bonnie told me 175,000 per day is what our current payroll is with benefits. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind, that it costs the county and our constituents expect a service from this county. So I'm not saying to undo anything we have, but I just want people to be aware of there's a real cost. And as our budgets get tighter, we don't want to have to let people go because we don't have money to meet the payroll because we're paying for so many days that are not productive days. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? Anything else to add?
Great comment, Mary.
I would like to just throw something out, and I know this may not be the time to do it, but Mr. McLean, of the 11 days we presently show, which ones are federal holidays?
I think all of them except for Columbus Day is currently not a federal holiday recognized at the state level.
And I believe Christmas and Good Friday are not national holidays.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. The one thing we could consider, and you don't need to do it now, commissioners, is the fact that, replacing those non-federal holidays or getting rid of them and then putting in the Juneteenth at some point in time. Columbus is not a federal holiday, so there's some options to clean it up. I think for state church reasons, some places do not honor Good Friday and that type of thing. They're open, so just food for thought for the future. I don't know if, I don't think we want to tackle that today, but I'll put that out there at some point in time. We review that part of the policy and decide, hey, which are the federal holidays that we're going to observe and align them with what are federal holidays and what aren't, and then go from there. And I think that might give us a better picture of where we should be at. And I agree with I agree with floating holidays for staff. I think it needs an end time by a certain date that they have to be completed. So with that, I would support the 27th, additional for Christmas.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I would be happy to come back with a resolution relative to certainly the Juneteenth day, because there are some issues with floating holidays and policy issues, as you mentioned, time frame and
Yeah.
other thing. So if there's general interest in that from the board, we could act on the Christmas holiday. Sounds like there's some consensus for that. And then I could come back with a resolution for the Juneteenth day with all the particulars in there so that we could pin that down if that would be acceptable.
Thoughts, Commissioner? I'm hearing, seeing thumbs up. As I look down the table, Roy, thumbs up. Okay, with that, we should entertain a motion for Monday, December 27th as an additional day for staff. December 27th.
Correct. So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Shanefield, December 27th will be additional holiday this year for staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Then also with that, you'll bring back a resolution and we'll deal with Juneteenth as well as that point, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you. Any other things for Mr. McLean before he leaves, commissioners? All right, thank you. Okay, moving on. I believe we took care of tab I too, commissioners. Tab J, request approval for employee policy amendment, and that will be handled again by Mr. McLean. Mr. McLean, the floor is yours.
They say government's not efficient.
Huh?
They say government's not efficient.
Yeah.
Check them out.
Well, yeah, uh-huh.
So as part of our continued review of the policies, one is Chapter 1, Section 2, defined terms. There's a minor amendment in here with respect to probationary period employees. Depending on the nature of the work in general, the probationary period is 6 months. But there are some jobs and circumstances from time to time where the probationary period needs to be longer. That longer period is communicated in the offer letter and throughout the process. It's also at times where an employee has difficulty of either getting an opportunity, in some cases with training, as we saw during COVID, and other times or weather related, where that simply can't be done in that 6-month period. And so we're just basically leaving some room in there to accommodate longer periods of probationary periods when it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McLean. Commissioners, any questions regarding the proposed policy amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. McLean. So in the policy change says during the probationary period, employment may be terminated by either the county or the employee for any reason. So the question I actually had is in this area. Elected officials and our department heads may extend this period probation up to 1 year to allow more time for employees to become acquainted with the job as a result of absence or for unacceptable job performance. I guess if we go into that process where we extend someone out in their probation 6 months, is there a process that we follow to make that determination by the department head or the elected official? How do they share that with the employee and how is that disseminated? I guess that would be my question, is just making sure if we're going to extend it out, what's our paperwork and what's our processes to ensure we're doing it in a fair and consistent manner?
Yeah, so obviously the elected official or department head is responsible for evaluating the employee's ability to meet those probationary requirements. And so the typical way that is handled is through written communication to the employee, indicating that the reason for extending it or that the performance expectations that haven't been met need to be met by such a date. Sometimes it's a month, meaning they couldn't get to a training or whatever, and sometimes it's many months. And so the typical method is just a letter explaining the circumstances and the time frame which that is required.
And do we inform employees if they are through their probationary period as a successful 6 months through a similar letter process, so they know that, hey, I'm not on probation anymore?
As far as I know, every department does that, as well as we send out the notification of
Okay.
their payroll change.
That's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Thank you, Mr. McLean. Other questions for Mr. McLean? Commissioner Tolman.
Mr. McLean, would it be possible to add a statement just stating that the employee shall be notified in writing of the time extension and the reason? Could we add that statement?
Absolutely.
Okay, sure.
I'm happy. It's fine.
Okay with that? Anybody agree or disagree? Commissioners, you okay with that?
I
Extending
think
the-
it's an important thing to add, Mary, just because of consistency.
Okay. Any other comments, commissioners? All right, no comments. I will say, commissioners, what's your pleasure with regard to approval of employee policy amendment, chapter 1, section 2, defined terms, which is probationary period employee, as well as the additional language that was presented by Commissioner Tolman. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion with that additional.
Okay, I have a motion by
statement.
Commissioner Tolman to approve the policy change as presented, the policy amendment as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Up next is tab K, approval of remuneration for exempt emergency operation center, the EOC Incident Command County personnel, which has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. Go ahead, Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners. This is a topic that we had addressed briefly, probably back in June or July. And so to close the loop on that, essentially the issue was during at the onset of the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about how the public agencies were to respond and coordinate the response both for communication as well as action. As part of that response, ultimately the Emergency Operations Center was activated, and various staff members, both exempt and non-exempt, assumed roles in the COVID response process. Obviously, for elected officials that participated in that process, there's real no discussion in terms of additional remuneration because they're prohibited by state statute from receiving more than their constitutional amount of pay. So there's no real discussion there. With respect to all hourly employees, they're paid hour for each hour they worked up to the overtime threshold of either 40 hours, or if they're in law enforcement or fire, the appropriate thresholds in those agencies. So they were paid for the time that was worked. The question that came up was with respect to exempt staff who participated in the COVID response throughout the pre-EOC, EOC activation in supporting that response. So during that time, a number of, in fact, I would say most exempt staff for the county facilitated or helped or aided or participated directly and indirectly in the COVID response process. And as part of that, as you know, there were timesheets submitted, and ultimately the county received approximately $104,000 of reimbursement through as a result of that. And so the question that was being bantered about back in June, July is whether there should be any additional compensation or recognition for those exempt employees who were part of the EOC response back at that time. The difficult part in addressing, well, let me just back up a little bit. So as you know, when we talk about exempt employees, we're talking about employees that are exempt from the minimum wage and overtime rules of the Fair Labor Standards Act. And as a general rule, additional compensation for exempt employees is not expected, nor is it typically appropriate. There are times when it is appropriate, and I've provided, I think, the classic example of that scenario in your packets when, for example, a plant or a manufacturing process has a work stoppage for labor strike, and exempt staff will run the facility locked in for some period. They're performing duties that are outside of their normal day-to-day duties. Those are areas that are classic examples where additional compensation is merited. In the circumstance that we had during the EOC activation, from my opinion, I'd say most of the work was consonant with the training scope that exempt employees, meaning Gene did stuff with Public Works. I did stuff that's reasonably related to HR duties, purchasing, fire, emergency operations, those types of things. So I think finance, related to finance of those issues. So I think everybody pitched in with great cooperation in areas that were reasonably related to their thing. In addition, there was clearly time outside of normal work hours. I think that's both expected and part of an exempt position, as you're paying for a job to be done, not hour for hour. The question that I think needs to be answered is whether one, that was excessive, meaning beyond what is reasonably expected to be performed. Two, whether it's outside of kind of the scope. And three, given the fact that the county received some reimbursement based on those efforts, should some or all of that be distributed to those exempt staff that worked during that project. So in your packets, there's not a lot of things to do. So I try to give some categories of options. Obviously, there's more tweaking we could do in that regard. But my thought on this is really this: if the board is of a mind to recognize some kind of additional remuneration, I would stay away from hour for hour. That jeopardizes the concept of being exempt. If they were inclined to do that, I would suggest sort of a lump sum or amount. And the second option, which I've addressed, is some sort of additional time off, which could be awarded in that, to recognize that. Certainly, that was not a time for anyone to be taking time off. I think it was all hands on deck. So that makes some implicit sense. I think the difficulty is, for the most part, if you look at folks that have been around during that time, they have high accruals anyway. So it doesn't, in my opinion, seem like a great, form of recognition. The third item that I threw out there is either one, using the money, or some sort of recognition, which from a personal perspective seems important, of the overall county effort in the COVID response. And that means elected officials, exempt personnel, and non-exempt personnel. From my standpoint, that was the highest level of cooperation and coordination we had in the time that I've worked for the county. From the significant upheaval for custodians in trying to sterilize the building, to financial challenges, to law enforcement challenges, to purchasing, acquisition, distribution of PPE challenges. The list goes on and on. And so, it seems to me that what needs to be recognized as the comprehensive sort of team effort. And I would even include the other cities and outside agencies in that also. But that's the issue before us today. I think those are the substantial background and facts, and see where the board sits. I'd be happy to entertain any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Questions, commissioners? Mr. Shanefield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many employees do we currently have right now?
About 266.
Okay, other questions? Commissioner Tillman?
That's roughly FTEs.
Yeah.
So you would recognize all employees basically, right? Some way. Or would you just pick the ones that did overtime?
What I'm suggesting is that that in recognizing, I would recognize the elected officials, the exempt and non-exempt employees who participate in that process. As you know, I'll use my own example. When we do stuff like the discussions we have today, when we host meetings for the COVID stakeholder groups, my staff is helping develop materials. My staff is scheduling interviews. There's nobody here that does this stuff by themselves. Not for the commission, not for the department heads or elected officials. It really was almost all hands on deck to pull that response off. And I think that from my standpoint, we've kind of sort of let that tail off. And I think it's important to recognize the significant effort in cooperation during that point. So that's my personal feeling. But I think the discussion is whether some or all of the 104,000 that was received needs to be, distributed or redistributed in some way to compensate exempt staff who performed various functions during that time.
Other questions? Commissioner Shanefield.
Not necessarily a question, but I've been approached by a couple of, quite a few actual employees. And I believe that if we just recognize our salaried, exempt staff, that leaves a huge gap and a lot of frustration from our hourly staff that they did. Everybody bonded together. Everybody was working from, different locations and trying to make things work and coming together. I think that our custodial staff is absolutely an excellent example of those folks were here. They were doing a great job. They were providing what we needed to keep our facilities open. And that was key. And so I guess I would suggest if we do want to do anything, that we divide that out by the number of county employees as a thank you. That would potentially, so it's $393.69 per employee. If we bump that up to $400 an employee, I know that's not a ton, but it's a little bit right before the holidays to say thank you. That puts it at $1,862 over what we got back, of which I think we can figure out a way to cover that small amount at $7 per employee. And I think that goes a long way in saying thank you to our employees. And I think now, even if some of the employees weren't with us during that time, I still think that that's a good sentiment, and moving forward would be seen as a good gesture from us to them if we choose to do anything. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Shanefield. Other commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Lloyd.
Two things to this. I want to start by just discussing my feelings about providing a bonus to a salaried employee for providing extra time during COVID. I struggle with that. I ran nonprofit organizations for 15 to 23 years. I remember when my competitor organization went out of business and I worked 37 consecutive days, and not once did I ever think I'd get a bonus, because I got to be honest, until I went into my own business, I have never not been a salaried employee. And I'll be honest, I never saw the good side of the salary employee. And I know some people say there are, but I never saw it. And I guess to me, there are times as a salaried employee, you have opportunities to work a little less and compensate out. But there are duties and expectations that aren't met. And I think that's part of your job description. And I don't think you should receive excessive compensation for meeting your job description. I think we could use an example of, what if we had a significant flooding and we had about 7 department directors out there filling sandbags for 2 or 3 weeks. I think we might look at things differently, because you're going really outside of above your your expertise level, but I have a hard time doing a financial compensation for that to those specific people. I do think recognition is huge. I think we need to glorify and share the joy of the work that was done in that EEOC. I mean, I know Doc was the chair and he would be not available to receive this because he's an elected official, but I know Doc put in tons of time. And I do think, and not just Doc, I know the partnerships were created. And I think you hit one interesting thing. We've been trying these intergovernmental meetings to work together. That's one true example where we all work together past those. So I think we should recognize people that way. As far as Commissioner Shanfeld's idea, I do agree with that. And I do think that, you know, our employees, not only did they do a great job during the COVID time, they were out here. There were people that weren't working, but we were able to get creative, allow services to continue. Those guys were in the front line. They were exposed. They did their job. And I think we should recognize the team effort throughout the whole. And that's just my feeling. And I think, and the honest truth is, I think if you look throughout the state, and I think we can compile some data on this, there are counties throughout our state that are doing some continual bonuses, using some of the extra funds out there to the employees, and those things. And I'm not about, you know, we got to watch the bottom line. And I totally agree with that. But if we have that extra money, I do think that's that we weren't anticipating based upon the reimbursement of that. That's a great way to go with it. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any other comments? Commissioner Tolman.
I don't know how you do it fairly. I would just like to take the recommendation of our HR person. I think they should be recognized, but you know, again, if one day of payroll is worth 175,000 or exactly whatever it's worth with benefits, we've already issued an extra Christmas day. So it's not that I don't think our employees should be recognized or receive extra reimbursement. I mean, we're in declining revenues. We're in the time of declining revenues, and keeping everything intact and supporting core government is really important. And I did hear from some of the exempt employees who did not think it would be a good idea to offer a bonus or additional pay. So there are on both sides of it. It's not that they don't deserve it, or I think just to stay legally correct with the exempt employee position to begin with, that we should not, that it should be counting towards our total payroll and maybe those extra days that we offer as holidays to help reimburse those days when no work is done. To be responsible to our constituents and the taxpayers, I think we have to be cognizant of that side of the issue as well. Not that our employees aren't wonderful, and I know they worked very hard. So that's all I can say.
Thank you. No, sorry. Other comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
I want to echo something that Commissioner Tolman also said. I had 3 or 4 directors that would be eligible for what we were talking about within the bonuses reach out to me and also said, I don't think I should get this. Like, this is just part of my job. And I think I should echo that we did have people come to us and talk to us about that and share that information.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Other comments? Other comments? One thing I would like to mention is there's also coming up next is next agenda on the item, which brings up some issues that we got to move slowly to be informed, but be ready to position ourselves if those federal guidelines or rules when they come into effect. And that's dealing with the immunizations as well as face coverings and testing. And we know where the state stood after this last session, but we also know what may is probably going to come down from the federal government. And I know there's also been some discussion about immunizations in the county from certain departments and that, and I don't think we can ignore it and that type of thing. And one of those conversations with immunizations is a incentive to get immunized if employees want to do that. Again, the reason I bring that up is, you know, I think we need to have that conversation as well in the next agenda item, that also falls into this idea of incentivizing and that type of thing. So a consideration might be to table what we're doing right now and combine it with the next conversation, see where that shakes out, and then pull them all together based on what we decide, because one could impact the other, especially if we're talking about using that $104,000 that we were reimbursed and impacting it. Just food for thought, commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shanefield.
I don't want to combine the vaccination and testing mandate potential with telling our employees thank you for the extra work that they did during COVID. I think that they need to be two separate conversations. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. It's respected.
Mr. Chairman, I'd agree with that. That was my sentiments as well.
Very well.
I don't think they're tied together.
All right. Very well.
Mr.
Other-
Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, I am. I do agree with Commissioner Sandfeld. I've said that way too many times today. And I'm going to stop that, but this is the last time. So she's just been passed through the microphone a couple times, but I do agree. I want to keep the conversation separate. I'm willing to listen to the next presentation till we move forward with the previous decision. But I want to be very careful as we start talking about bonuses and vaccines and things like that. So I want to make sure we look at, even if we do hear the information before we make a decision, that we look at them separately.
Very good. All righty. So the option could be, if I'm hearing a little bit leaning towards waiting, but I'm also hearing, let's not wait. So commissioners, your pleasure.
I see no reason to wait. I think we can make a decision on this and move on to our next agenda item
Okay.
for clarity purposes.
All right. We've got this, handle it. Commissioner Shanefield.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we provide $400 bonus as a thank you to each of our employees that would be eligible. I believe that leaves out elected officials. Is that correct,
That's
Mr.
correct,
McLean?
yes.
Okay. As a thank you, utilizing that $4,721.83. Trying to think if there's anything else that I need to add into that.
You want to balance that with out of the reserves, that extra?
Yes, yes, and
Very good.
the additional 1862 out of reserves.
And that would be a budget amendment that Bonnie would have to bring forward.
Yes, sir.
Very good. We have a motion by Commissioner Shanefield to divide the 104,000 by the employee count and provide a $400 bonus to each employee. The balance that's needed to cover that 400 would come from a budget amendment out of reserves. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I have a motion by Commissioner Shanefield. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just for clarity, just so that we don't have any, that's taxable, so there'll be the associated
Yes.
taxes
Yep,
with that,
that's
just so everybody's clear.
Yep. Very good. Is there a second
I'll second. So we can
Second.
have discussion.
by Commissioner Smith? Any further discussion? I don't think there's any.
I was
Mr.
going to ask that.
Chairman,
We'd run it through payroll. It would just be run through
Yeah.
payroll. Okay.
Through payroll, which will then have its deductions, everything. Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Toman.
I would ask for a roll call vote and that the final figure also include the payroll. So it's going to be more than 18,862.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a roll call vote. Commissioner Shanefield,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Still deciding.
Yes.
Commissioner Lloyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Toman,
No, for the reasons I stated earlier.
and Commissioner Wendling. I know it. I know it. No. Motion carries 3-2. Thank you. Make it happen, Gary.
Thank you.
Moving on with the next discussion will be the concerning the OSHA COVID-19 workplace vaccine and testing mandate. Commissioner McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners. As you know, there's been a lot in the media recently about the COVID-19 workplace vaccination and testing mandate. There's probably been even more discussion within the state of Wyoming. More that's known now that some of the rules are out and still much that isn't known. So a couple things that I think are important to note. First of all, Wyoming as a state has chosen, and the federal OSHA allows states to submit plans for OSHA management that are equal to the protections or substantially equal to the protections under the federal OSHA requirements. Wyoming is one of those states. Wyoming has its own OSHA plan. And as such, in the context of this mandate, federal mandate, the state has to develop rules that substantially implement that federal mandate. As of yet, they have not done that. So they have until approximately December 5th or so to develop those rules. And so we don't know exactly what those are going to look like, but I think it's safe to say that the rules will be substantially similar to the federal rules. So the concept behind this mandate is essentially that under the general duty clause of OSHA, we have as employers a broad responsibility to provide and protect the safety of employees while in employment. And so the concept is that vaccinated or unvaccinated employees are a risk that needs to be managed within the workplace safety guidelines of OSHA. And this rule is an attempt to do that. While we are waiting to find out what those rules are, I think that it's prudent for the county to develop both a policy and some procedural tools to be able to address this, obviously anticipating it'll be substantially similar. Because of the tight timeframes, that substantially is going to have to be at the December 7th board meeting that we would have to be prepared to act on that with the idea that we would have some state rules potentially by that, but it's certainly possible that we don't. The risk for the state is if the state fails to implement rules, then of course the federal OSHA authority can implement, setting forth a process to implement similar rules. So essentially, without getting into a lot of the weeds on this, essentially the issue is for folks that are unvaccinated, we would have to test every 7 days. There would be a mask requirement in virtually all areas of county government. There's a couple areas that we could scrutinize a little more closely. One of the main challenges, obviously, in this is if you think about, I don't know that we have a good number of vaccinated versus unvaccinated, but let's just say it's half. Let's say it's 130, or for sake of argument, say it's 150 that are unvaccinated. You'd be looking at 150 tests times 52 weeks. You'd be looking at significant amounts of tests over the week. So we would have to identify a test that could be performed efficiently, that was cost effective. There's significant regulations around what tests would be acceptable. And so that's one of the challenges. There are some exemptions, as you know, primarily the religious exemption and medical exemption. The medical exemptions are much more defined in terms of which medical circumstances necessitate an exemption. The one that's probably been discussed the most and has caused the most consternation is the religious exemption. And John and I have talked about that at some length and will continue to essentially, looking at guidance from other federal agencies that have religious exemptions like the EOC. There's some broad rules with that. So we would set forth a process, meaning paperwork, whereby those exemptions could be applied for and reviewed and considered and either honored or denied in accordance with those rules. In addition, there's a little bit of a logistic hurdle to overcome, which is you have to go through the process of determining who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated. And obviously, as you know, there's rules governing that also, and substantial compliance with that process. So the bottom line is that in the state of Wyoming, we don't know precisely what the rules are. We do know that the federal guidance is that if you have a state plan, you have to substantially comply with that, which Wyoming has done through their broad state plan, but is yet to issue specific rules here. And so our plan at this point is to have all the pieces in place so that we can adopt and implement and then be prepared to tweak if those rules differ in certain areas. There's a lot being done behind the scenes in terms of legal issues with the Attorney General's office and the governor and lots of other things. And John, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit and some of the challenges. I think that's more your bailiwick.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Okay, Mr. De Leon.
Chairman. So I think today, in terms of options, today is mainly discussion, providing notice, not just to you as commissioners, but also to the employees. If there are timeframes, federally, there is the January 4th timeframe that has been identified. And so part of the purpose of today is to be able to give everybody an opportunity to vaccinate if they so choose, but also to let you as commissioners start having the discussion. You certainly can make decisions if you deem that that's appropriate. As far as timing, I think Gary started to outline that. There is a federal, there are two rules out there. There is the OSHA rule, which is vaccinate or test. And then there's a second rule, which is for federal contractors. And that one is a vaccinate rule. It's not vaccinate or test. So the OSHA rule, actually both of them use that January 4th timeframe. And so Wyoming does, as Gary identified, does not follow, they haven't adopted OSHA, they have a state plan instead of directly using the OSHA plan. And as a result, they have 30 days to respond to the OSHA vaccinate or test rule, which Gary identified leads to a December 4th, right in their timeframe for the state of Wyoming through the Department of Workforce Services to issue a response. Now, the funny matter that exists in there, the legal issue that exists in there is OSHA does not use state or political subdivisions in their definition of employer.
With respect to the federal OSHA.
With respect to federal OSHA. The Wyoming Workforce Services does use that. And so I've sent an email, put in a call to the AG's office, essentially asking if there will be something in that 30-day response that addresses that distinction, and specifically the distinction as it applies to this particular emergency temporary standard. Okay,
But good for just a second. That's an important point that the federal OSHA standards do not include state and local governments as part of their standard. So if it weren't for Wyoming having a state plan, then you would say this doesn't apply. Wyoming does have a state plan, and that language includes state and local governments.
so timing is again, one of the variables that you as commissioners have to work with. When do you choose or not choose to make any implementations? And the variables that you have in front of you are there's going to be a 30-day response. Of course, the governor they've signed on to a lawsuit. There's no injunction in there, so nothing's been stayed pursuant to an injunction. You know, the legislature got together, they had a special session. Their special session said, don't vaccinate unless you are required to do so, which does have some value, I think. I don't think it's a mere protest. That being said, as the data continues to come in December 4th, and the state will inevitably make decisions in terms of how they are going to respond with their particular employees. And so you will continue to receive data that will affect your options in terms of timing. So that's a second area that you guys have options with. You also have options in terms of the policy purpose. And I think Gary's information that he provided you in the packet is very helpful to looking at those options. One option that he identified, or that is in the paperwork, is having a mandate policy. One policy example that is provided in the paperwork is a voluntary policy. But there's a third way of describing it, which is sort of a middle ground potentially, and substantially similar to what the legislature said in their meeting, which is you don't have to necessarily, you can if you choose, identify the policy purpose as a mandate or voluntary. You can identify it as consistent with required federal, state, and local rules and regulations. So you can move forward saying that you will be consistent with that which is required versus formally identifying it as mandatory or voluntary. So that's a purpose where you have variables and you can decide how you want to move with those particular variables. Other variables that you have to work with is you can define the religious exemption, and you can choose the definition that you deem as best for the policy. As Gary mentioned, the EEOC definition does have a lot of broad language that is used, such as saying that those don't necessarily have to be acceptable, logical, consistent, comprehensible to other religious beliefs. They don't have to be theistic or not. They can be theistic or non-theistic. They give a lot of different descriptions of that particular definition. So you can choose to adopt a definition or not adopt a definition, and you can choose which definition you choose to adopt for that particular exception. Another variable or option that you have to consider, and they're tough no matter which one you look at, but these exceptions are available as long as they don't create an undue hardship. And Gary started to allude to that because the potential costs of tests can be pretty high depending on how things are implemented. So you must start to consider what is the level of undue hardship that you as a commission are feel is appropriate. Another variable or option to consider is the implementation process. Some implementation options that you have are to make shots available in the building, for example. Another option in terms of implementation are to potentially provide incentives. And that's, I think, what the chairman alluded to earlier. So those are things that you'll have to decide. You know, and it's tough because there's a lot of different ways to look at these things. Some things are hard, but you can see where you can strike a balance potentially by, on the one hand, nobody wants, it's hard to think about the idea of an incentive sometimes, but on the other hand, you can develop the policy to have a focus where you choose to have that particular focus. So when you look at the voluntary policy that is provided in the paperwork, you can see that it says that, you can sometimes have more success by putting a priority or a focus on encouraging and making things available versus some of the disciplinary procedures, things of that nature. So though, as far as implementation, you have the availability option, you have the incentive option, and then you have, when you start talking about forms, some forms are provided in the packets, but the distinction, the variable for you to take a look at are those forms can be self-certification forms, or they can be third-party certification forms. So that's a variable that you can consider how you would like that particular policy to exist. And so those forms can refer to vaccination itself, the religious exemption, the medical exemption. Do you have them all be self-certification forms? Do you have them be some combination thereof? You'll notice that when you get examples, of course, you can see that reason, oftentimes can exist in each option that is chosen. So, but you'll also see that there will be recommendations for this particular form to be self-certification, then this form will not be self-certification. So they're not necessarily consistently done, but that's something that you as a board, and again, the purpose is to try to point out all of the variables, all of the options that you have to consider. Another option or consideration in terms of the forms is multiple choice or fill in the blank. As you look at those different forms, vaccination, religious exemption, medical exemption, one of the examples that was provided, for example, for the medical exemption has, here are the 1, 2, 3 reasons that a medical exemption would exist. So it's multiple choice essentially. Whereas the religious exemption is a fill in the blank. So you can make these, you can make them all fill in the blank. Sometimes it's a little difficult to know how to describe the religious exemption. And so you can, if those are identified more clearly, that could sometimes be helpful. Again, those are decisions that you can make as a board. And lastly, as far as the options, you can decide where these processes are implemented. You've got HR, you've got the elected, you've got the department heads. Which pieces do you want responsibility in each particular location? So, for example, when you start talking about making vaccination available in the building, would you want that to be handled by the department heads? If you want it done, would you want that handled by the elected? Would you want it handled by HR? The incentives, the forms, as far as vaccination, where do you want all of these different processes handled? So that's kind of the, I guess, all of the legal issues and all of the options that you have before you in this process. So the main part is for you to see everything that's on the table.
Thank you.
Little light reading. Be that as it may, there's are some definite decision points. But I think our goal right now, first of all, on Thursday, we'll have a meeting with the department heads and elected officials to start engaging the discussions. Because we're talking about a lot of high level legal compliance, procedural requirements, but obviously folks in departments and employees are talking about real boots on the ground considerations. So we'll try to bring those together as we move forth, start the dialogue and process of getting questions answered, so on and so forth. So that'll kick off Thursday. And it's my plan right now when we come to the December 7th meeting to have at least an implementable plan and policy in place, which either can be tweaked or changed fairly easily, depending upon what we get from the state, if anything, basing it right now on substantial compliance with the federal plan.
Questions, commissioners, comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lloyd.
Yeah, a question for Attorney DeLeon or Gary. Either one of you can answer it. I know we kind of touched on it and all the information you provided, but with the current lawsuit and injunction types, does that delay our having to move into this possibly? Where does that sit and play into all this?
Mr. Chairman.
Good decision, Gary.
Commissioner, so again, the difficulty is there's no injunction attached at this time to that lawsuit. And so while again, timing is one of the variables that you as a commission have in front of you. And so there is a December 4th, right in there, you have your 30 days for which the Department of Workforce Services has to respond to that OSHA vaccinator test rule. So you will be able to observe that. But again, the value of starting to discuss this is so that you can start wrapping your mind around it. There is another January 4th timeframe, which has been identified by OSHA as the date at which employees should be fully vaccinated. So that's the other purpose of today, is to be able to give employees notice if they did want to be consistent with that. They have the opportunity to get the different vaccinations that are out there, not just the Johnson & Johnson, but so it doesn't delay. And so inevitably, you want to start considering, I mean, it makes sense to consider what is a rationally defensible policy that addresses the issues, if it's something that you want to adopt. Again, it's those are decisions for the board.
Commissioner Lloyd, I would just add, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Lloyd, I would just add to that is, and at least as of this morning, the only injunction, which is, temporary injunction, has been in the 5th Circuit. We're in the 10th Circuit. So I think the 5th Circuit is like Louisiana, and so that's the only place where the temporary stay right now has been recognized. Nothing that I'm aware of in the 10th Circuit. So
thank you, Gary. Commissioner Shanefield.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. John, what if we were to choose to not follow this requirement? What would the teeth be in that, and what would the consequences be for the county?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner. So the enforcement mechanisms for the OSHA vaccinate or test rule, they've identified that there could be a potential $14,000 fine per incident component. That's what's been specifically identified. So I think it is still undetermined how federally they would look at enforcement techniques. But that's one thing that has been specifically identified. On the contractors vaccinate rule, a federal contractors rule, enforcement would be potentially by way of the actual contract or monies that are available. And so currently, the rule for contractors does not include grants, but it is something that you would want to consider the implications for other areas. And again, so those are some of the enforcement tools. And again, why you would consider avoiding, again, when you're developing that policy that would be potentially rationally defensible, you can include what parts you want, you can exclude what parts you want, you can put the priorities where you want and how you want, and develop the forms, definitions, etc., to create a rationally defensible policy as you deem fit, if you so choose.
Thank you. Other questions, commissioners? So as I looked through that, the one thing I really stuck out more than anything is I think the medical is pretty solid. It's got edges. It has edges to it as to exactly what has to be followed. The religious exemption, though, seems pretty loose. When I look at it, which tells me that it probably would include non-theological denominations as well. Am I correct, John?
That's correct.
Yeah, so being a tree worshiper like I am, that'd be, it'd work. If, sure as the world, I'm not going to get in that argument, so. But anyhow, my point being, it's loose enough to where it will help those that choose to go that route. So, thank you. Other comments, commissioners?
I just have another question. Do we have to make a decision by December 7th as far as adopting a policy?
You do not. Again, each of these options, I think the point of the discussion today is for you as commissioners to see where each of these options or variables exist. Whether it's the definition, whether it's using incentives, whether it's using a self-certification type of form versus third-party certification type of form. Timing is one of those variables that you as commissioners can determine when is the appropriate, again, you'll be able to see when the state, how they're handling their employees. You'll be able to see if, that's part of the hard part about this is that, the discussion was coming up and the legislature was in special session. So you sit back and you waited for that. So it's important to bear in mind all of these different dates, and you can choose to after on December 7th to say, we are not prepared to make this decision at this time, but continue to keep the employees on notice that if you do, and this was part of the discussion in another, with another entity that do you take away an option for the employees by waiting? So you can choose to wait, but it's also valuable to continue to keep the employees on notice so that they have the opportunity to vaccinate if they choose, and to meet those timeframes.
Go ahead, Commissioner Shanefield.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if any of the other commissioners have talked to anybody from the WCCA, but I know there was discussion around them providing some support to counties navigating this. So I would be interested. I'm going to reach out to them, just wanting to give a heads up. And I don't know if anybody else has had any conversations. If so, I'd love to hear about those.
Yeah, and there's probably has been a couple meetings that have been open on the Wednesday afternoons to talk, and missed a couple of them because of other meetings. So
Yeah.
Commissioner Schoenfeld, just, it's important to know in that regard, John stays in touch, as does Danny, with the county attorneys around the state. So they do discuss this. Also, I think the challenge right now for everybody is that if you engage today, the Wyoming Workforce Services, the folks that are implementing the OSHA, or you look at their website, there's very little information out there. So I think the challenge that we have is that not having that information puts us in a position of trying to identify the decision points, as John said, have a plan in place, and then be prepared to address that as those things hopefully are emerge and we get more information to go the, directions that the board deems appropriate. And so that's the stance we're doing right now with the circumstances. I think it's, essential that we engage the discussions, that we have a better, fully understanding of all of the decision points and the implementation challenges, as well as the costs. And I want to be clear, they're significant. As I said earlier, I mean, you'd be looking at $780,000. The rules don't require to pay for costs for testing. I just want to be clear about that. But if you're looking at 150 people tested every 7 days, you're talking about $780,000 at $100 a test, which might be, on the low end. It's real money. So there's real significant challenges. I know you guys are working on the budget. So for all these reasons, we need to kind of continue to slug away at this.
questions? You need some direction today? I think, well, go answer my question first.
Yeah, I think that from our standpoint is to try to have all of the policies and pieces in place so that we can move forward and respond to whatever the regulatory environment and directive of the board is. If that changes, then I guess no harm, no foul, but we want to try to have those pieces in place so that we can move forward with substantial compliance. Right now operating around the federal guidelines until we get something more clearly from the state.
Yeah, under the presumption that the federal guidelines might land directly in our laps, and the state, some way now, it's not determined in rules that we're exempt. We look at the worst case scenario and prepare ourselves for the fact that if we're not ready and choose to do nothing, we could be faced with a $14,000 fine per whatever. So it could, is that correct, John?
Yeah.
So Commissioner Toman?
Well, I think it's important that we, I think, submit comments to the workforce services and ask them during their comment period to consider being consistent with the federal plan with OSHA, which excludes counties. First of all, I think that's an important move for us to make. The second one is maybe to work with the Board of Health to get a vaccination clinic going in the county and get that started. So if people choose to do it, they're not up under the deadline of getting it done. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to submit comments to workforce services, asking them to be consistent with the federal plan.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
For recommendations of our legal.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Shanefield.
I just want to make a comment on that. I don't fully disagree, but I need more information on exactly what would be in that. Because I think we're touch and go with how things are going at the federal level and at the state level. And I want to make sure that we're very clear about what we're proposing to workforce services.
Mr. Chairman,
There's
Commissioner
a
Lloyd?
deadline.
can I ask Commissioner Tolman a question?
Sure.
I guess just kind of for some clarification, I was about to second, but so I could just get to discussion and be able to ask the question. But so what exactly are you proposing? And just make it a little more clear, because I do think I could be supportive, but I was uncertain in the exactness of it.
Well, may I ask for assistance? I could state it, but I'd rather he stated it legally.
Go ahead.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
De Leon.
Commissioners, so it's a little bit difficult of a concept, but OSHA defines employee as not including state and political subdivisions. The Wyoming Workforce Services definition specifically includes state and political subdivisions. And so they're in their comment that they have to, in their response that they have to provide in 30 days, they could potentially address that distinction. Unfortunately, I don't think it's as simple as saying, we'll just use your definition for this emergency temporary standard, because the Department of Labor, the Federal Department of Labor, identifies that if you have a state plan, you have to include state and political subdivision employees in your state plan. There's still a room to have a discussion that says we've included them in the plan and we have included them to this extent, not this extent. So just because we have a state plan doesn't mean we have to go here. We can go at a different level. It doesn't, just because we have a state plan doesn't mean we have to maximize that the way that that's handled for the emergency temporary standard. So there would have to be some language if they so choose, meaning the Department of Workforce Services in their plan to address that. And that would be something that you as commissioners, if you wanted to communicate, I submitted the question to the Department of Workforce Services as well as the Attorney General's office, have not received a response. To the extent that you would like to not just ask about it, but submit a direction that the commissioners, the board would like to proceed in, or a response that is desired, then you could, if you wanted to do that, then you could do that.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we take a position.
Thoughts?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Smith?
John, are they able to pull that distinction out? I mean, sounds like it's pretty clear for most. If you do a state, you've got to do it this way. And I mean, I don't know if our recommendation to say, hey, follow something else is going to make any difference.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I asked the question if it was appropriate, or if it had any bearing. That'll be for the Department of Workforce Services and the Attorney General's office to decide if there are any, just like the governor, just like the legislature got together and they determined what was appropriate, if anything. They will have to decide what substance is included in that 30-day response.
Okay. I mean, I think that we can have our opinion. I don't know that it's going to sway anything or anybody, but we could write a letter and send it off, I guess. But I don't think that. I think there's larger forces at work, and our desires not to. I don't think that it's going to have any impact at all.
You've asked the question already to the attorneys general and that type of thing. So they have that information.
I have submitted that, Mr. Chairman, and as Commissioner Smith identified, that's one variable. The other variables that are directly decisions that you make are in terms of the policy variables.
All righty. So I think when we serve notice, for lack of better words, to ourselves or employees, I think they're going to be wanting to know an idea of which direction we are looking in case, not in case, but when the federal mandates fail or fall, fail, I hope, but fall. And possibly within that are where we're going to, what are those variables that we want within that policy? And I think Mr. McLean and Mr. De Leon would kind of like an idea so that they can come back and at least have a conversation of, hey, this is what we're looking at. It could possibly happen. Mr. McLean?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think it's really abstract to try to make all those decisions without something in front of us. I think what I'm suggesting is we'll come back at the December 7th meeting with a draft policy. And as we go through those, we can highlight those decision points and be prepared to say yay or nay. So that we have something in front of us that makes it a little more tangible. It's kind of, like I said, very abstract right now to try to make which decision points without seeing what those implications are. And so I think from my standpoint, we're prepared to the 7th come in with, a policy and then, discuss those key decision points and then finalize it around that.
Yeah, but in the meantime, we can serve notice at the employees that there is something coming.
Yeah. And
there is could be some accountability if we fall under the guidelines of the federal government. So in some instances for them that, I fully respect the fact that if nobody wants to vaccinate, and I think there's some things that allow for waivers. But then I think there's some people that's just been waiting, don't know really what to do, and kind of on the line and probably would go if they had to. I think might help with getting some vaccinations. But I'm going to clearly state also that I'm one of those that I feel everybody should be responsible for their own health. I don't think I should, even though I know the importance of vaccination, the importance of face coverings and the importance of testing. I don't think it's my position as a person to tell somebody else they need to do it. So, but unfortunately, sitting on the board with rules and regs coming down, I may be part of a policy that has to look out for what's best for the county and may request some things I don't agree with. Let's put it like that. So I think it'd be fair, commissioners, to say proceed. Mr. McLean, proceed with meeting with employees. I think serve notice of what's ahead. I'm going to probably say there's a stronger chance it's going to happen than not. And then bring us forward some options that we can choose and let the employees know what options we're looking at. So they, in their minds, can make a better decision what they want to do for themselves, as long as they're working for the county. Fair enough?
Sounds good.
Commissioners, what's your thoughts along that line?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Lloyd.
Just after having time to hear Ms. Toman explain a little bit more and hearing John De Leon's concepts, I do wonder if it's pertinent if we as a whole have a stance to maybe send comment and to workforce services saying, if we have to comply, we have to comply, but to make a statement that, I know I personally feel it is, I agree with you, Doc, that it is a choice. And if I choose to get vaccinated, that's my choice. And I really feel some of the mandates are an overreach. And I think maybe if that's the feeling of the entire commission, maybe we should put comments to workforce service for them to determine that as they move forward. And I think, I know that's a strong statement, but if we feel that way as a whole, maybe that's a discussion we should have and look at some comments that can be made.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make that motion again. I think it's important that we state our position to be consistent with the federal plan, which does not include political subdivisions, because it takes us out of that $14,000 fine. We're still going to have to comply if there are any federal rules that we have to do. We're still going to have to comply. And Commissioner Smith, maybe we can't make a difference, but if we don't stand up and say what we believe, we're just folding in.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Just a point of order. I think if that same motion is being put forward, I think it would be appropriate that another commissioner make that motion, just procedurally speaking. And so if Commissioner Lloyd is wanting to make that motion, it would make sense that he would make that.
So, yeah, for procedural reasons, Commissioner Tolman, will you withdraw your motion?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could just also suggest, I think the difficulty is the content of the letter. And so I'd be happy to work with John to get a draft letter that could be circulated, because I think it's a substance that everybody's concerned about. And I'd be happy to work on a letter reflecting those sentiments, and get it circulated and try to get something refined if that's what the board wants to do. And then that's typically what we've done in the past, is get something on the table that we can see that's tangible. And then everybody sort of say, I'm comfortable with point A and B, but not C, and work it out that way.
All right, very good. So
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I would have a hard time moving a motion with saying we're going to send a stance that I can't see in writing before we actually send it out. I think if we give Mr. McLean is at least getting a gist of what a commission as a whole is looking at, and can use that information to create a response for us to make a decision. But I also do agree with Commissioner Tolman, we should take a stand. I mean, this is a huge issue, and I actually had advice last night not to make a stance on this issue, but I do think we should make whatever our stance is strong. So,
Very good.
so I'd like to see do you need any more information from us, Mr. McLean, and the gist of the commission as a whole to know the direction that letter should go in?
I don't feel like it right now. I feel like you make a pretty good stab at it with what's been communicated, and then just circulate it, get some feedback until we can arrive at something that there seems to be substantial agreement upon. So I think we can make a go at that.
Okay, and then as once you get the final letter ready,
Yeah.
and if it's prior to the next meeting, I think you can send it out and we'll know, reply all. We'll know where we're all at. That final letter could come out, and in order to get it sent prior to closing comments. When do comments close, John?
December 4th.
December 4th. That's prior to our next meeting. So if we use DocuSign and reply all, maybe we can get it quickly done, and we can all agree final and then sign it.
Sounds good.
Commissioner Shanefield.
Mr. Chairman, I feel that it would be appropriate for me to make a motion to have Gary move forward with the letter based off of our comments here today. And then we will circulate it and approve the details once it's prepared.
Okay, very good. Got a motion by Commissioner Shanefield to have a letter prepared stating our stance to the workforce service. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lloyd. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. All righty.
Good discussion, guys.
Good discussion item. With that, commissioners, next item up is a break, which we're pretty close to. So let's take a break and go be back here at 11:35, commissioners. 11:35. That's about 12 minutes. All right. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order and welcome our audience back. Our next agenda item under tab M is an update from Castle Rock Ambulance. And I believe we have Mr. Stanton here as well as Director of Castle Rock, Executive Director Bailey Doctor. So welcome. Good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Bailey, I believe you're going to start off.
Yes, sir.
Will you introduce Mr. Stanton?
Yeah, this is Dan Stanton. He is our board chair.
Very good. Welcome,
And
Dan.
I'm Bailey. I'm the CEO at Castle Rock Hospital District. And we just wanted to come here and give you kind of a mid-year update. Last board meeting, Dan suggested that we get in front of you all and let you know how things have been going. So it's really just to let you know how things have been going the last few months. So as you all know, we are the taxing district in Green River, and we assess 3 mills within the hospital district here. And we run both the medical center and the ambulance service. So this year we took over for Memorial Hospital, Sweetwater County's ground transports that go from basically from the hospital to any outside entity, Casper, Utah. And we took that over September 1st. It was fast and furious. It was really, it's been, a really eye-opening process for us. But we're excited that Memorial was willing to do that. And we're continuing to work with Memorial to make sure that we are providing good, transports for them. And the month of September, surprisingly, was maybe a little bit slow compared to what we were expecting. But a lot of that was because the University of Utah was on emergency divert with the COVID wave that was happening this fall. So a lot of patients were staying at Memorial and not necessarily leaving as quickly as they would otherwise. So it's slowly gotten more and more busy. We do have the same medical director, I believe, that Sweetwater Medics has. It's Dr. Najam, and he's been our medical director on the ambulance service with the hospital for a long time. And we are working with Dr. Najam because he brought up a concern about a month ago that he needed us to develop some transport protocols, which we hadn't done. We were basically functioning off of our regular 911 protocols that we always have. So we are working with him and getting those finalized. We're very near the end of having those protocols finished. It'll be a working document though, I'm sure forever. And we're starting to see some of that income coming in now as far as the transports go. So we did go ahead and purchase an ambulance this summer. It was delivered the beginning of September, and we did that because we needed more vehicles to have ready. We didn't want to be, under on our fleet with having transports. So we did purchase another ambulance. We now have 4 of them. We staff 1 full-time ambulance, which is what we have always done. We also have our management team that takes command when there's a critical call that goes out on backup. They may also respond on a primary call, depending on how bad the call is. So we have 1 full-time crew. We have our management team that takes call, and then we have a backup crew that will be ready if there is a second call that goes out. So the other kind of exciting thing that happened for us this year was that we went on the Woods Cross wildland fire in Montana. We had a crew go up there, and they were supposed to be gone for a week. The county fire actually helped facilitate that. So we're really appreciative because it's something that we've wanted to do for a while. So we were excited to be able to go. We were supposed to be gone for a week, and they ended up being on the fire for about 21 days. So yeah, 2 women on our crew, and their kids got to start school and do all the things on their own, but they really enjoyed themselves and they want to go again. So we're hoping to be able to continue that next year. We have seen a higher pace of 911 calls this year, which is completely random. There's really not a way to predict why that is. And so we typically will have between 12 and 1,300 calls a year. And now we're on pace to have about 1,800 calls this year if it continues. Just the month of September alone, we had over 200 911 calls. So we were very busy, and which is not necessarily a bad problem, but if that were to continue, we'd have to look at staffing up, just because that's not necessarily something that we're equipped to do. And we have also seen an increase in, Sweetwater Medics and Castle Rock have always taken call for each other and gone on standbys when, we need to in the neighboring communities. And I think just the nature of having more calls to go out on, we have seen an increase in standbys that were going on in Rock Springs as well. So just a couple of things that we keep in mind when making sure that we have enough staff on the ambulance. So we now have 30 people on our ambulance. We have 8 full-time EMTs, paramedics, EMT intermediates. We have 2 of our full-time managers, and then everybody else is volunteer and backup. So any combination of those are what we're using for ambulance transports, but we never have a situation where we pull our primary crew to go on a transport or anything like that. I know there's been a little bit of concern about whether or not that's happening. So I just wanted to reassure you that that doesn't happen. If we go on a transport, it's with a backup crew or a crew that we call in, or a lot of times our management teams are taking those as well. So we just wanted to say thank you. And I know this year, you've made a lot of decisions about the ambulance and you're continuing to make more of them. So just wanted to let you know that we're grateful for all of your work, especially Commissioner Smith and all of your help on the ambulance subcommittee. And if there's any questions that we can answer, or Dan, if you want to add anything.
No, Bailey covered it very well. We just wanted to come to you guys one time when we're not asking for money. That wasn't the issue. So and get you updated on how things were progressing with us taking over the transports. So yeah, it's been a really good year for the ambulance service so far. Well, busy year, which isn't necessarily good for other people, but
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Thank you, Bailey. Questions, commissioners, for the Castle Rock, for Bailey or Mr. Stanton?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Shanefield.
Thank you. I just, there's a rumor out in the community that we had University of Utah Air Med looking at coming in and helping us provide services for our ambulance. And there's been some conversations that it's been brought up that Castle Rock was not wanting to be a part of those conversations. So I was just wondering if you could touch on that and kind of explain. I think the public should have that knowledge and know, guys, what you guys are thinking around that and what we're trying to work towards as a county ambulance. We can work with that.
Sure.
Do you want me to address that?
Yeah. So when AirMed reached out to us, they, sorry, I'm trying to think about how that went this summer. I remember AirMed asked us if we would be interested in basically selling Castle Rock ambulance service. And at the time we were in negotiations with the hospital for ground transports. And we were also, it was kind of the start of our budget year. So the timing of that was a very busy time for Castle Rock. And it was a very soft request, I would say. Like it was, would you be interested in selling your ambulances? And we were at that point really just gearing up. So we're trying to hire staff. We're trying to retain people because we're about to have a lot more business. And just in the, kind of the nature of trying to focus on getting more people on the ambulance, especially over this last year, where we've lost some people because of the volatility, because people don't know if they're going to have a future on ambulance service in Sweetwater County. We did have 6 of our 30 people leave this year, and for various reasons, but I know several of our full-time staff that left, it was because they didn't know if Castle Rock would any longer be operating an ambulance, or who would be necessarily. So when the University of Utah, or when AirMed reached out to us, it was, would you be interested? And we said, if that's something, that the commissioners want from us, if that's something that we have to do, essentially, of course we would be on board. But at that time, kind of a lot of the discovery and stuff that AirMed was asking for was going to be a very cumbersome for us to come up with within the time frame that they needed. So we're finalizing budget, trying to hire people. We're a small organization and they need a lot of information from us. And they told us it wasn't necessarily like dependent on Castle Rock giving them, all of our information before they made that decision. But I will say, in working with them and the questions that they had, they were very good. They were knowledgeable of our area and they seemed like they were invested in making sure that they provided good care here. We work with AirMed when they have to, get in the back of our ambulance and stuff. So it wasn't necessarily that we weren't willing to work with them. It was just more, it was kind of confusing why we would, put forth all of this effort and time to basically give away a service that we're not necessarily desperate to get out of. and to reassure our staff too. Like if we came back to the staff again and said, well, it looks like we might be getting out of the business again. Like it just seemed like this year was really a tough time for all of them. So that's why. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you, Bailey. Appreciate
Can I add
that.
Something else.
Yeah, Mr.
Our
Stanton.
board is a little hesitant in selling all of our equipment and building because of the volatility in the ambulance service. We're concerned that if something fell through, that our community would have a backup. So our board is, not that we wouldn't sell our things, but that is an issue for us, that the board wants to make sure we maintain service for our district. And we wanted some sort of backup plan. So that's also been in the back of our discussions as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Other questions, commissioners? Other questions? Okay, I have one. You said you handle the ground transport? Who handles fixed wing transports? out of the airport?
To my knowledge, it's Sweetwater Medics that gets those calls.
And then, of course, Air Medics handles life for flight and that type of thing.
Correct.
Very good. Thank you very much. Other questions, commissioners? No, I would just say carry on, keep the good service going for the county as well as more for Green River, which you do serve. But I also want to say thank you for being there available when Sweetwater Medics is busy and vice versa, that Sweetwater Medics is there for you guys. But we appreciate the update. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Be safe.
Thanks.
Before we go on with our next one, which is the Southwest Counseling, I don't think it's going to take us to there, but it could. I just want to serve notice to everybody that at about 12:20, doesn't matter what's going on, we're going to take a break because at that point in time, there will be a Zoom meeting that we're going to try and put it in here from pardon? Terra Power and Pacific Power, Rocky Mountain Power, regarding notification of the location of the first nuclear energy site. And of course, there'll also be notification of where it's not going to be. So, you know, we keep our fingers crossed, we keep hoping, but at least we're all included when the decision comes out. So we will take a break for that. And then we will resume the meeting following that. But those that are here are sure welcome to stay and listen, see what Terra Power and Rocky Mountain has to say. For those that do not, that's fine. And I will apologize to start with to the rest of our agenda folks that we may interrupt you, and please be patient with us. All right. All right. So next up on our agenda is Southwest Counseling contract. And I believe online we have Ms. Akers, CEO of Southwest Counseling. Linda, there you are. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you have anybody with you that you'd like to introduce at this time?
Melissa Ray Marquette's on. She's the CFO of Southwest Counseling.
Very good. Thank you. And welcome, Melissa. At this time, I would turn the floor over to Ms. Akers. Linda?
We did receive the agreement between the Sweetwater County Board and Southwest Counseling, and there's just some minor adjustments that I think that we've already made that helps clarify it. At this time, I think if you have the agreement before you.
We do.
Do you?
Yeah, it's in our packets. We have it.
Okay, I think page 1 is absolutely an improvement. The changes have been made there. If you go to page 2 of 6 and you go to number 4, and it is letter B. And my recommendation is if you start with crisis stabilization, which is in red, is utilized for acute behavioral health crisis, which directly impacts the county budget as it relates to Title 25. I would put a period there, and I would delete all the way until the very last sentence, which can say SCS Title 25 diversion report will be provided to the county.
Hang on a minute. We're looking at it, and we also have Mr. De Leon who reviews our contracts and
And the only reason I say that is because Title 25 diversions are a lot more than just going into crisis stabilization. It's an entire report of the number of assessments we do, the number of emergency holds we do, and how many people go into involuntary hospitalization. And I think it's a very comprehensive report that the county commissioners would be interested in.
Mr. De Leon?
Mr. Chairman, I was just clarifying, Miss Aker, did you say to delete everything after that Title 25 on? where it says
Yes,
budget?
except for the very last sentence, and I can send my recommendation. That last sentence could be SCS Title 25 diversions report will be provided to Sweetwater County.
Do you have that, John? Okay, just write it down and mark it. We'll have Mr. De Leon look at that, Linda.
Okay, because I can tell you for FY21, we did 246 assessments, which is quite a few. And out of that, there were only 138 detentions that we had to do. But out of 138 detentions, only 3 went to an involuntary hospitalization, which is phenomenal. But if we want to stay with the contract, which we do, the number D, I think the very last sentence, SES staffing levels are able to accommodate. I think that's just redundant and I would delete that out.
We have that deleted, Linda.
Oh, you do? Okay. And then that was my only change in the contract. And then the last question I have for you is, who do I send the reports to and when?
John?
Mr. Chairman, so just to answer that question, broadly speaking, this contract is, addressing the buildings, addressing the services that Southwest has in relation to the county. I think some of the difficulty this go around was that some of the discussions were a little bit late. And so this year, you as a board are meeting with the entities a lot earlier in the process for the budget process. So it might make sense for you to consider when you do have a meeting with Southwest to ask them to be able to provide that report when you have that meeting, because the part of the purpose of those budget meetings is to be able to develop this agreement in the different ways that you as a board and Southwest deem is appropriate. So that would be a time frame to consider.
Thank you. Does that make sense, Linda?
Yeah, my comment would be, Mr. Chairman, that whatever report you do want from us, I can provide to you. So if there's ever a question or a need for clarification, I can just follow through for you.
Yeah, I think it's more falling in line of verification that services provided are supportive of what the funding that the county gives you, and it's all in line. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we can certainly demonstrate. For last year alone, when we put the dollars to Title 25, it was around $160,000 worth of service.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. And we do appreciate your work with Title 25, as well as the other incidents you got to deal with there at Southwest Counseling. So thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, commissioners? John, do you need time to think about that, or?
No, Mr. Chairman, I would say that that, I think that the changes that they've made, I think I've spoken with Commissioner Smith. It seems like, the main purpose is to take a first step here. I think that that first step is documented. I think that moving forward, you as commissioners can continue to determine how to frame the nature of the relationship. There are a lot of different components and discussions that you can have, and hopefully you can have those discussions during your board meetings so that everybody's on the same page and able to fully vet any additions or changes that the parties would like to mutually have.
And that I see can be a working draft document, but also can be part of the discussion for budget as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I think our intent is to make sure that we have our contracts in line by the time we do our budgets with many of our outside agencies, component units and that. Correct?
Mr. Chairman, I did neglect one change, and it's still on page 2 of 6. It's item C.
I
And
think, if I might say, Linda, that's probably Melissa's fault.
yeah, I think it is Melissa's
Okay.
fault.
Okay.
She'll take the
What-
blame for me.
All right. What,
No, I
what-
think she's the one reminding me, Linda.
okay.
Under special circumstances, I would delete, and I would put individuals must be medically cleared by a medical professional.
Okay, help me out. You got to help me find it again.
It's page 2, under
page?
number 4, and it's C.
Okay.
And under special circumstances, I would recommend a delete. And then follow it with individuals must be medically cleared by a medical professional.
We currently have individuals.
Yeah,
must be
ours reads
medically cleared from
differently,
Memorial Hospital,
Linda.
Sweetwater County.
Yeah, you have from Memorial Hospital of Sweetwater County, but we do send our people when they don't need to go up to the hospital to other medical providers to be cleared.
Oh, okay.
It's just a mute point, but it's important.
Did you catch that, John?
Ms. Aker, could I clarify, did you want to leave under certain circumstances in that paragraph?
No, to delete it.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman and commissioners, I think that there is certainly value to getting this signed, since it reflects the June, July timeframe. So I think accepting those recommendations makes sense. I think that moving forward, you can consider, and these discussions have been had in the title with the meetings put on by the hospital, where there isn't a need that all individuals are medically cleared. And so that's a discussion that you can have in more detail with not only Southwest, but this agreement, of course, is with the board. So that's a piece of the puzzle that you can consider having a further discussion with the board and with Southwest as you deem appropriate.
These are state standards for us. It's a social detox. And before a person can enter a social detox, they have to be medically cleared. But it doesn't have to be by the hospital.
That makes sense.
That makes sense, yeah. I just talked. All right. So we have a couple changes that certainly can work into the contract, so. Anything else, Linda?
I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Great. Did you check with Melissa?
Yeah, I will. I'm checking with Melissa.
All right, don't want to leave her out of the loop.
No, we can't leave Melissa out of the loop.
All right, very good. Thank you. Commissioners,
you.
anything regarding the contract? Mr. De Leon, I'll ask you again, anything else? There's
No, I think
All right,
Thank you.
so with that, commissioners, your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Smith.
I move that we approve the agreement between the Board of County Commissioners for Sweetwater County and Southwest Counseling Services with the presented changes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve with the contract with the changes presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Tolman. Any further discussion?
And I'd ask that the chairman be allowed to sign.
Oh, good, good addition. Would you second that as well, Commissioner Tolman? Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so the motion is to approve, allowing the chairman to sign. Any further discussion? All those in favor, just signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Looks like we got a contract, Linda.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, and you be safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Melissa. Okay, moving forward, I think the next thing on our agenda will be the museum. It was an added agenda item as O. And please come forward, introduce ourselves and welcome. I believe we're here for a facility request. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Shanefield, for getting me on the agenda.
Introduce
submit
yourself.
it.
Introduce yourself, please, for the record. When you have a moment.
David Mead, Director of Sweetwater County Museum. I'll try to keep it short. We don't want to miss the nuclear announcement. But I must mention a little bit of history to set the stage. When this courthouse building opened in 1967, most of the basement was occupied by the county museum. Artifacts collected by George Stevens, Bill Hutton, the Ganslins, many others were transferred from the old Green River Museum that was housed in the old UP Social Hall. Flash forward 2001, the museum was moved across the street to its location in the old Green River Post Office. Due to lack of space, most of the collections were put in commercial storage until recently. Thank you all very much. However, not all the artifacts made the move. An old piano was left in the courthouse basement, where it remains today. According to Gary McLean and Ruth Lauritsen, former director of the museum, the piano was used to play Christmas carols at Historical Society, Christmas parties, and on other occasions. Flash forward again to a few weeks ago, when Gary McLean had the piano moved out of storage and into the community room, which is located in the basement across from HR. Gary plans to get the piano tuned and have it played again. You all probably know that Joe Barbuto, our new treasurer, is a pianist. Anyway, when I heard of this, it gave me an idea to put a Christmas exhibit in the community room. As you all probably know, we do a Christmas exhibit every year, have forever. And it's usually in the museum. I thought we could put in some cases, historic toys from our collection, other artifacts, traditional Christmas tree, decorate the room. It could be open to the public. And we could also perhaps have an open house event. And I believe Commissioner Shanefield said she can sing Christmas carols. Anyway. So we have a pianist and a singer.
Bring in
Y'all
Wild
come.
Five, bring in Wild Five.
So I've spoken to Gene Legursky and Gary about this. And I just had Gene read this a few minutes ago, and he said it sounded good to him. But he's deferred me to you all to ask you, the commissioners, to please discuss and grant your approval or otherwise.
Very good. Thank you, David. Commissioners, any questions?
Make sure you have chocolate.
Chocolate.
Yeah.
Get my
I,
pen out right there.
I,
down.
I noticed you did include the little note at the bottom that the piano was presented to the community of Green River by the Women's Club of Green River, 1928.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know how much time we would have, but I believe the piano was part of the original collection.
Sure.
That came, was moved from, first it was George Stevens Museum in his house, he and Bill Hutton, and then to the UP and then here. And it's been in an old storage room down in the basement. In fact, when I first came here about 11 years ago, Mark Bish took me down there and he said, "You see that piano over there behind all those boxes and stuff?" He said, "That belongs to the museum." And I said, "Good, that's a good place for it." Because we didn't have any storage room.
Safe place. You bet. Okay, very good. Wow, that's pretty exciting. Commissioners, this is a facility request to set up an exhibit down in the community room. And of course, the piano's already been brought out of storage, so we know that. So what's your pleasure with regard to approving this facility request?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Shanefield,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the facility request as presented.
we have a motion to approve as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries happily.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
very
David. Thank
much.
you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your efforts and willing to do that. Someone, for those things to happen, someone has to grab the pail and run with it. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I think it'll be fun and maybe we can have an open house with refreshments and mulled cider, that kind of thing.
Yep.
See
Chocolate.
what happens in chocolate.
Chocolate.
Mr. Tolman.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all.
very much. Have a good one.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner.
I'd be
White.
remiss to say that our treasurer is a heck of a piano player. And we know who can play some piano tunes down there.
There you go. There you go. All righty. With that, moving on, the next agenda item is, of course, Sweetwater Medics is here. And let me ask this question. Mr. Gaddy, are you going to be somewhat remiss if we have to stop in the middle and take our? All right, let's see what we can do. Okay. All right, come on up. Mr. Gaddy with Sweetwater Medics. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
see you have
Chairman.
a guest with you. Will you introduce him, please?
Well, I have half my family here, believe it or not. My cousin Candy. Oh, wait. And James was my cousin too, so you'll never escape it. And my son is here with you as well. So,
that's funny. Okay,
so,
floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity today. I wanted to come before you. As you know, there's been some cost center shifting with the ambulance services. With Castle Rock taking over the ground transports with Memorial Hospital, that has changed the availability of revenue sources for Sweetwater Medics. And I provided you all some documentation so that I was, you saw that I was legitimate when I came to you today, in that the amount of revenues that was gleaned from that historically helped us pay for 911 services. And I also showed you what our bottom line was for the same fiscal year and how that, without that revenue source, how that's not going to balance out for this year. And I've had the opportunity to speak with most of you one-on-one about this. In being brief, I wanted to come before you all today and request that you would approve an additional $235,000 for Sweetwater Medics for the remainder of the contract, so that we could balance the bills for this fiscal and financial year for Sweetwater Medics. And I do want to say that we have had some, although we were disappointed that the University of Utah thing didn't pan out. And Jeff, I know you've had some conversations with those in the other committees too. It seems like the attitudes are really changing to a more positive way for, I think that we're on the verge of a new structure. I think sooner than later, I hope so. I hope so. I think that finally we have some commitment from folks seeing that this will be a good thing for us to do a restructure. So with that said, I did provide you with the figures. Is it okay if I say them? Is it okay? Okay. That revenue source to us looked like it was about, and what I did was I gave you all a detailed revenue report of what long distance transfers were, not including all of those transfers in that report that I gave you were the ones that we are no longer have the privilege of providing for Memorial Hospital. Those are only long distance transports. And you'll notice if you can glue the pages together, every one of them are long distance mileage. These are not short transports. These are the interfacility transports to other hospitals. That revenue picture for us last year was just over $475,000. The our P&L showed that we had a profit margin of just over $308,000 total last year. That as we project, we're seeing the losses now. We've basically eaten the first 6 months. We're seeing those losses now. In order for us to get to a very close to a balance point, plus or minus about $50,000 or $60,000, we felt that we needed to come to you and request an additional $235,000 to be approved for us to continue through the next 6 months to get to the end of this contractual year.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Gaddy?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd?
First, I want to thank Ron for having a conversation with me, letting me ask some tough questions the other day and letting me ask for a lot of information and also getting that. So I want to thank you for your help in that. I guess the question I have is what would be the ramifications if we chose, if we were unable to fund that at this time?
Okay. So you guys know there's no one that dislikes this model more than me. Okay. I want us to be, in order for it to be operated by a private entity, we need to at least break even or show a profit. We have to do that. And so if I can't do that, I can't continue to go into, because it comes back on me personally. Okay. I can't take the risk of not balancing that budget. And so we would not be able to continue. And that's why, and I'm sorry about the timeline. This timeline is, and I asked even advice, how do I say this without saying it? The reason I didn't come to you guys before is because we had that wonderful tax initiative, and it would have been, you guys would have said, well, let's wait and see what this tax thing does, right? So, and in order for, by the contract, we have certain deadlines of notifications that we have to do. And this is and so that's why I'm asking for a decision today. And I wanted to give you as much time to look at all these numbers as you possibly could before the meeting, because if we can't continue past the end of December, because I have licensing and some of the things we do are fiscal year renewals, some of the things are calendar year renewals. We have calendar year renewals that we have to pay for, and if we can't continue, I wouldn't be paying for those. Does that make sense? So like a license and things of that nature. So getting back to your question, we wouldn't have the money to continue. We wouldn't have the money to continue. We would have to forfeit the contract, even though there's money coming in from that. It wouldn't be enough to pay for everything that the contract requires until the end of June.
Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Toman?
Yes, on collections, what is the percentage of collections that you are? Yeah, that's a big question. I understand you have an outside firm doing collections, but on the street, I've talked to people that said they've never gotten a bill from an ambulance pickup in August.
Okay, so
what's your percentage of collection?
So so this is a very complicated question. We have a very high, and I will give you a key performance indicator report. I can run those. Okay. This is unlike anything else that we buy. Okay. If I as an ambulance guy or a medical provider, if I come to you and I say, I have something to sell you, you want me to do something for you, I say the price is $100. Okay. Well, it's not always $100 because Blue Cross Blue Shield, Medicare, and Medicaid say, I'm not paying $100 for that. I'm only paying what we decide. Okay. So that's called allowable write-offs. Okay. Right off the bat. So if you're a certain, and this is crazy, the only people that retail pricing in medicine applies to are people that don't have the means to pay for it, the uninsured. If you come to me without insurance, it's $100. But if you come to me with insurance, it's less. Does that make sense? It doesn't to me. Okay. So if that bill's $100, Medicaid and may say it's $20. And if you want Medicaid payments, then that's what you must accept. Medicare is the same way. They may be $35. Okay. Blue Cross Blue Shield has their own number that they would say that they're going to pay. So right off the top, you take that off. We have a very high collection rate of allowable. But as you notice on that report, the billed versus collected is way different. Billed might be 10 million. It doesn't matter what you bill. It doesn't matter. You can make your bill be $10 million for a stub toe, and you're only going to get whatever third parties decide it's going to be. And with Medicare, Medicaid, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, you can't balance bill the difference. Okay. So when you say, what is your collection rate? We have a very high into the 80, 85, 89% of allowable charges. But compared to our billable charges, it's very low. Does that make sense? And we can't change it. And if you talk to Memorial Hospital, Castle Rock Hospital District, it's the same metrics the same thing that we all run into. And there isn't a one of us that would say Medicare, workers' comp, Medicaid, and Blue Cross reimburse us fairly for what we do. But it becomes a volume game. Okay. That's why your doctor only spends 5 minutes with you, because he's got to get more Medicare patients through, more patients through, so it makes it sense for his day. It's broke. The system's broke. But Jeff, if you come to me, you don't have insurance, guess what what you're going to go to collections for? The whole amount. That doesn't make any sense, but that's how it works.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Tolman?
And the reason people haven't gotten a bill is because they were under those plans. That doesn't allow us to balance bill, and whatever their insurance, they're done. Whatever we got, we have to accept, and they're done. They don't get a bill.
It's a huge discrepancy, though. What is the enhanced income other?
The Enhanced is our company that does our billing. Enhanced, that's a general, when we get deposits from them, that's how it's categorized. That way we know it came from our billing organization. It's revenue.
Okay. Other questions, commissioners? While you're pondering. There was a time when you came before us, and I don't know if it was just certain members of this commission or it was past commission, there's a conversation about charging at the maximum level, and I think you were a little lower than what Castle Rock was at that time. Did you bring your rates up to the level?
We did. We brought our rates up. It didn't yield much of anything, like I said.
Yeah, but I meant, but still, you brought it up to where.
Yes, we did. And remember, we actually came and asked permission when we did that, because
That's right.
That was a requirement. So we did come and I provided you guys with those rates, and I can do that.
I
again if
remember
you
that
like.
now when you talk about the rates. Okay, thank you. Other questions, commissioners? I got to ask this question because as I think through this and think of budgets, this 235, is that correct?
Yes.
You believe it'll take care of you for the rest of this fiscal year through June 30th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you say you have some contracts that are due at the end of December. Are they this money impact that, or are you able to adjust your budgets kind of like we do? We move from operations to capital or capital operations to make those, and then towards the end of the year, we do a budget amendment. My point is if you waited and did some adjustments and came in 2 or 3 months, closer to the end of the year, that amount you need to, like you said, break even, not to make profit, but break even, because that's taxpayers' money is there for. Would it be better to see what that looks like? Because it might be less money to taxpayers? Or you see where I'm going?
I do understand that. And the answer to that question is we wouldn't be able to do those renewals. They're enormous. There are insurance renewals and things of that nature. And I wish that that wasn't the case, but.
Okay. I'm going to do this. Let's see commissioners thinking, unless they want to make a motion right now, but we need to get ready for Terra Power. So how about if we take a break, table this until we come back? Is that okay? Or are you ready? Ready?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would ask you to consider taking the break if you could.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's table this and take the break and address it when we come back. Thank you for allowing